welcome to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is the 1993 Menendez brothers trial, California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose. And their defense is self-defense. They were in fear. This is their defense strategy is putting forth the defense that they were in fear of their lives. They were in fear, having been in such a traumatic, in a ABU SIVE type of environment. YouTube censoring us. They grew up. Lyle and Erik grew up in such a horrible environment with the maltreatment that they got from their parents, and that led them to years of that leading up to them feeling so trapped and threatened for their own safety and their lives. So that is the defense that we're looking at. I personally believe the boys, and all I understand that there's, the cycle of abuse and how it goes, and how um you feel trapped in those situations and you don't think clearly. I myself was in a an abusive relationship. I was married to someone who was very emotionally, verbally abusive. He also got physical on occasion, never punching, but using his body to block me or, prevent me from leaving. He pinned me down to the bed, like, completely one time. It was terrifying. Anyways, um, so yeah, things like that. I'm well aware of, things going on in an abusive situation and how you don't think straight. You don't think clearly when you're in that environment. And you also have to remember that the abusers have at some point in time, like, seeped into your brain slowly and subtly that you're not good enough, you're worthless, you don't deserve anybody else, you don't deserve better. These things go happen in these relationships, and that's what you start to believe because you're told that constantly. So I like to look at these cases from that perspective, and that's what I'm trying to do by showing this trial and restreaming it, just to, rewatch and look at it from a different perspective. So, trigger warning, sensitive content. This is part 4 of Lyle Menendez's direct testimony. This is going to be the last part, and then we will get to his cross examination. So, just letting you know where we're at. So please, if you don't mind, hit that like button. It is free and it helps promote this stream to others, and it helps YouTube understand what you like to watch. So please hit that like button and let's begin. So again, we're going to just pick up where we left off last time. And you know what? I'm going to go back a few seconds just to kind of pick up where we left off. And here we go.
Big national scene on TV, and that's the way my dad thought. Didn't like messy problems, like things simple, and so that's one of the reasons, basically the reason I didn't want to initiate a conversation myself, although we were very much hoping that they would do something.
All right, let's take a recess, ladies and gentlemen. We'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour.
Sat in his room and I slept where I was, and we had just decided that more than likely,
Remember, his dad doesn't like problems.
if something was going to happen, it's going to be at night. That's just what we felt. And that was certainly the only real purpose for having the shotguns was for the night, and that's what we were most worried about. And so we just stayed up as long as we could while still getting some sleep. And we figured after a certain time that we were probably safe for the evening. So that's why I didn't sleep. Didn't get much sleep.
Did you have the gun in your room that night?
Yes.
Was it loaded?
Yes, I kept it in my bed, loaded, every night.
When you got up the next day, did you see your dad in the morning on Saturday?
He slept with a loaded gun every night because he was that afraid of his parents. So let that sink in. I mean, who's so terrified of their parents that they need to sleep with a gun? That's pretty that's next level scary, right? I mean, not many of us have been in that situation, thank goodness. Some of us unfortunately have, and many of us don't survive it. And I think it's fortunate that the boys took their safety into their own hands, and that's why they're alive today, potentially. I don't know if Jose would have necessarily actually taken their lives, but I do believe he would have punished them in ways that they hadn't even seen before from their father. I think he was that depraved and that much of a monster that even if he wouldn't take his own son's lives, he would have been doing more to treat them poorly and, control them and do whatever he could. So, but yeah, so he slept with a loaded gun in his bed, and the boys didn't sleep because of fear that their father would come into the room at night and hurt them.
Saturday?
No, I didn't see him until we came back.
Did you and your brother go somewhere on Saturday morning?
Yes, we left the house sometime in the morning, and we drove. We had talked about the night before that being a little. I had bought the shells separately from Erik, and there was some conversation about it, the concern for whether those shells would actually work in the gun, because I don't know anything about guns, and so we just wanted. It seemed like they fit, but we wanted to make sure. So Erik found a place in the phone book that I guess seemed like there was a lot of different kinds of ammunition and so on, and so we drove out there.
Where was it? Do you remember?
In Van Nuys.
And did you go to the gun store?
Yes.
And what did you do when you were there?
We asked the guy. We told him the kind of gun that we had, and I told him the kind of shells that I had bought, and just asked him a bunch of questions about what he recommended. And
He's saying shells like bullets, the shells that go in the guns that because then they buy shotguns. It's shotguns, right? So those take. I don't know anything about guns, so I would be in the same position where he's asking the guy what goes in this gun. But yeah, so I think they used, I believe, shotguns, and so they bought certain casings that go. So he's saying shells, but it's coming up as shelves with a V on the caption. So I just wanted to clarify.
for protection and so on. He was also extremely knowledgeable person, and just going on and on about the different kinds of ammunition, and eventually recommended a certain kind, and we bought that.
Did you stay away from home most of the day? Or did you?
We stayed away from home so that we could miss the trip, and which was most of the day. In fact, it was pretty much all day. And we got back like sometime around 4 o'clock, I think. Not exactly sure, but late.
What time were you supposed to be back to go on the trip?
At 3, I believe.
So were you intentionally late?
Yes, we were intentionally late, and I didn't want to be too late, but I wanted to be late enough to miss the trip, and I knew that my dad.
I think they're talking about the fishing trip out on the boat where they actually thought that the dad would actually take them out to sea and never be seen again.
Had arranged this trip, and he had to do it, assuming he wanted to. Something unusual wasn't planned. So we showed up, and they were still there.
When you said you didn't want to be too late, why didn't you want to be too late?
Again, I didn't want to get my dad to think that we were purposely avoiding the trip, and then have him think something strange was going on with us.
When you got back to the
He didn't want to bring attention to them. But he wanted to be late enough that it was like an excusable tardy.
house, had they left already?
No, they were still there.
How did you feel when you saw that?
I knew it when I pulled in because the cars were still there, and I just kind of pulled in anyway. And I believe my mom immediately came out of the house upset that we were late and let's go, and basically went right back in the house, and they had things arranged, whatever they were going to take. And it was just like a whirlwind of activity, and I never had a real chance to talk to my brother about maybe we shouldn't go or what. Next thing I knew, we were heading for their car to go. Mom was putting everything in Dad's car, and we had some discussion about taking two cars.
Who wanted to take two cars?
I wanted to take two cars.
Why?
Just thought it was safer to take two cars. And
having a car of their own would give them the independence to not have to stick around with their parents all day if they, if they could take off at some point. If they found an opportunity, they would have a car there. Or if something dangerous happened, then they would have their car to escape the danger. But let's see what happens.
Dad was insistent that we take the one car. And
Did you sometimes take two cars when the whole family was going to the same place?
sometimes we took two cars, sometimes we took one car. But neither would be real unusual. But I, again, didn't want to have a problem with him, so I just said fine, and we sat in the back. And
What did you think was going to happen on the fishing trip?
we felt that the fishing trip was arranged to kill us in a way that nobody could know.
Why did you go?
We shouldn't have gone, but I don't really know why we went. We didn't know what else to do. And it was just a constant thing with me that I did not want to give my dad the impression that I was going to go tell people like I had given him the impression before, apparently. At least that's what he thought. And so I basically just went along with the things he insisted on. And so I went.
Going along just to appease him, just to avoid conflict. This is very, very common of people who are abused and how they react with their abuser. They just get along to go, they go along to get along. They don't try to, even though they might have different ideas or different opinions, they just go along with the person who causes the most disruption when they don't do what they're saying. So, likely an abuser.
We just hope nothing would happen. Hope we were wrong.
When you got to the fishing boat, what happened then?
We got to the marina, which I don't believe I'd ever been to before, at least not that area. And there was this sort of scruffy kind of, I guess it was a boat captain guy hanging out in the dock, and my dad ran up to him and they started talking. And then my mom got the stuff out of the back and we followed her toward the dock. And then we got over to the boat, which was very different than I expected. And both my brother and I the whole thing was very, very strange, and it made us even more nervous.
What was very strange?
Just the boat was a very small wooden boat, and we had expected, we had been deep sea fishing before in Florida, and they were always, big, I'm not sure what boats are made out of, but like big white yacht type boats and this was a very small wooden boat with just one little section in the middle. It just didn't seem like the kind of thing that my father would rent to do his deep sea fishing, so I could tell.
Typically, he likes the finer things because he's got the money, he can afford it. So why are we on this little rinky-dink wooden boat?
My brother was real nervous, and I just didn't say anything about it. Commented on the size of the boat, something like that, and the captain said something. He seemed all right, the guy, but I figured he was either working for my dad or he wasn't. And so we got on, and we left.
And where did you spend your time on that trip?
Can you imagine getting on that boat, the feeling, the nerves that you'd be experiencing, thinking that this might be your last few minutes on Earth because your dad's about to send you off to a deep sea burial? I can't even imagine that feeling, but I'm just saying, like the nerves going on in these boys at this time, terrifying. This would be terrifying to anybody.
Definitely stayed away from my parents and just felt It sounds stupid, but we felt that at the very least we could jump off if we saw something unusual was going on. And we just tried to do it in a way that didn't look like it was obvious, but that it was difficult for them to get to us. And luckily the boat was just designed in a way that you really couldn't get around the side to the front easily. You almost fell off. You had to like swing yourself around almost. So we just stayed up there.
Up there being...
In the front of the boat. And my dad stayed in the back with the captain guy. And
They separated themselves. They distanced themselves from their dad the whole trip, the whole boat ride.
my mom was back there.
Was your mom in the back with your dad the whole time, or was she...
No, Mom was mostly in the middle section, inside. And I wasn't sure what she was doing inside, but she was in there.
Was the front of the boat a comfortable place to be?
No, I felt, it seemed like you weren't supposed to be in the front of the boat, and which is why we liked being up there, because it was very hard to get to, but it wasn't designed for people to hang out there. And it was a very cold, windy, like choppy waters, and the boat sort of bounced along, and water would come up, and it was extremely uncomfortable and freezing, which was...
They put up with that. The cold water splashing on them in a cold, windy night. I'm sure they were not dressed to be splashed on. And they would rather deal with that uncomfortableness than be near their father.
I was wondering if my dad was going to wonder why we were staying up there when it was clearly freezing and uncomfortable. But we stayed anyway.
Did you get wet?
Yes.
Did you stay up there through the whole trip?
Basically the whole trip. We came back when my dad caught the sharks.
Why'd you go back when your dad caught the sharks?
He told us to come back, and I couldn't refuse. They had caught a shark, and so it seemed like legitimate. So we went back, and there was a little shark, and so we did whatever we did with that with Dad and the captain. And I think that's pretty much the only time we went back. My brother might have gone back for something else, maybe to use the restroom or something, but I don't remember.
When you went back when your dad caught the shark, was the boat captain there?
Yes.
Was your mom there?
Yes.
Were you afraid when you went back?
I was afraid the whole trip, but I wasn't particularly afraid about it's. We had caught a shark, and so I wasn't necessarily thinking that there was something going on. But we definitely didn't want to go back. But there was just nothing we could do. My dad said, "Come on, boys, help with the shark." We were going to have to come.
What time did you get back from the fishing trip?
We all got back around somewhere around midnight.
And what did you do then?
And my brother and my dad, I think, they went in the house upstairs somewhere, and my brother and I managed to leave in his car and go over to UCLA.
And what did you go over to UCLA for?
We just wanted to talk, and we had not had a chance to talk really privately except on the boat, and we had no idea what was going to happen on the boat, so we just kind of really hadn't had a chance to talk at all, and mostly wanted to talk about the fact that nothing happened on the boat. And
did you think that meant maybe nothing was going to happen?
Yes, I was relieved that nothing happened on the boat. I felt less sure that they were going to do something. And although the whole thing was very strange. And so we went to UCLA in the stadium field, and we hung out there and talked. We had a pretty long discussion.
And did both of you, when you were talking, did both of you seem to have the same feeling that maybe things were going to be okay, or were you still concerned?
No. Erik was still, I don't think my brother was feeling better about the fishing trip too much. It was obvious that nothing had happened on the fishing trip, but he didn't take that to mean anything. Maybe they had just felt we were too much in the front of the boat or something. He wasn't sure. And so we had a conversation about staying apart the next day and just sort of going one day at a time, and that I would stay home and maybe they would have a conversation with me or something, or initiate something, and I would allow that opportunity and just hang out at home. And he wanted to be out of the house, he would be out, and then he would check in occasionally. And we talked about some other things also.
When you returned home, did you see either of your parents?
Yes.
Who did you see?
Well, we came home, and the door was locked. And I tried to, I checked all the other doors, and they were all locked. So I figured, they'd been locked on purpose, and we should ring the doorbell rather than just go over to my guest house and sleep there.
What do you mean you thought they'd been locked on purpose?
Well, the door had not been locked up to that point. So they had been locked, and
It wasn't a common habit. It wasn't a habit for them to actually lock the door. They left it unlocked. So the fact that the boys came home and the doors were locked, that's a big red flag, signaling like, hey, you boys might be in trouble and you need to ring the doorbell to get in.
so I figured they were locked on purpose.
So what time was this about? Do you know?
It was very late. I don't remember exactly what time.
Did you wear a watch at that time?
No.
So you rang the doorbell,
Yes.
and what happened?
Nothing happened, actually, for quite a while, and then eventually my mother came down. And she came storming down and opened the door and immediately started yelling.
What was she yelling about?
The fact that it was late and we were ringing the doorbell and waking her up, and just stuff like that we just, I made a comment that if, she would give us a key instead of, we would be able.
Yeah, the boys don't have keys. They're like grown enough, they're teenagers. They should know or, have the ability to be safe with a key to their own home at this point in time in their lives. Yet they are not allowed to have a key.
Able to get in the house. And 'cause she kept the keys. She liked all the keys and copies of the keys kept in this little drawer in the foyer. And, you could take a key and you could return it, but you couldn't just have your own key. And so I always was forgetting. And so whenever she did lock the door, since they were usually not locked, I was usually locked out. So I said that to her, and she just was furious, and she said a lot of the things that she usually does when she's furious.
What things did she say?
Did she say? That she hated us, that, we're nothing but a problem in her life, and also that she wished that I was never born. And that's when my brother said something in my defense, and she turned on him. And that's when she made the statement that if he had kept his mouth shut, things might have worked out in this family. And she said it very, in a fury. And as soon as she said that, she said some more stuff afterwards, and I told her, okay, Mom, sorry, and just basically let her win the argument and just, burn out. And she ran upstairs. And my brother and I stepped outside and had a talk by the cars about this statement.
About which statement?
The one my mom had made. As soon as she made it, my brother and I both felt that she had basically given away what they were doing.
Which statement in particular are you referring to?
The fact that if he had kept his mouth, she was referring to what he had told me, and that things would have worked out in the family.
Did you two talk
similar
about?
to what she said Thursday, but it was kind of different.
Did you two talk about what that meant?
Yes.
And what was that conversation between the two of you?
Basically, just that she had given away, something was going to happen, something was planned, and, she hadn't given away how or when, but that they had made the decision. We felt that they had made it, and
Yes.
that my mother, and I figured my mother, if someone was going to give it away, it was going to be my mother, and we felt that she had.
So the statement was to Erik, if you had kept your mouth shut, this family would have worked out? Is that the
If you had
statement?
kept your mouth shut, things would have worked out in this family.
Did you, after that conversation with your brother, did you go back and sleep in the guest house that night?
Yes.
And where did your brother sleep?
He slept in his room.
And did anything else happen that night?
No.
Next morning, did you see your brother when you got up?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
What did you do all day Sunday?
Well, I hadn't done anything. I had stayed up late again, and I did go to sleep, and I woke up some point in the morning. And I kind of just woke up and went outside to sort of see what was going on. And then I decided not to go into the main house. I stayed in my house. And at some point, my brother showed up in mid-afternoon, I believe.
Did you
In the mid-afternoon, around then.
did you make a call to Perry Berman at some point that day?
Yeah, I had called him before my brother had arrived to see if he could go out that night, because that was part of my discussions with my brother, which was that we would try to have as many plans in the evening, especially with other people, as possible, because it was just safer. And then during the days, try to be apart or not there. And so, yeah, I called Perry. And
Did you get to talk to him, or?
No, I left a message.
And during the rest of the, you said your brother checked back in with you at one point during the day?
Yes, around the middle of the day.
What was the purpose of that, of having him check
Well,
back?
we had arranged for him to check in, so I knew he would be at some point, and he didn't want to call in case Mom answered the phone at that point, so he just arrived, and I don't remember exactly, but he might have come into my guest house. But we had a conversation at that point about what had happened to him the night before.
And what had happened to him the night before?
He had had a confrontation with my dad.
Had you heard it the night before, or was this the first you heard?
This was the first I had heard of it. No, that's not the first I've heard of it. I'm confused. He told me in the morning, before he left, we had this conversation. And then he came back in the midday to check on me again. That's the way it happened. Because my dad had tried to get into his room the night before, he said, and had been pounding.
State of mind again, Your Honor.
All right, this is not being received for the truth of what was said, just to reflect the state of mind of the witness here.
Okay. So Erik told you that
He
your
told me
dad
that-
had tried to get into his room.
Right, and he had the door locked, and he told me the whole thing where he was sitting on the bed and he had the gun there, and my dad was pounding on the door and demanding that he open it, and he wasn't going to open it. And he was trembling, and he wasn't sure if he was going to shoot Dad through the door or what was going to happen, and that they basically almost had this whole thing happen without me even knowing. And he thought Dad was going to burst in, and he didn't, and he was pretty, really worked up telling me this whole thing that had happened, and I just couldn't believe it. I believed it, but I just was just amazed. And
How did it make you feel when you heard about this?
I couldn't really have been more nervous than I was already after what my mother had said. It was just added to it, just the feeling that obviously that night was going to be a problem, since I'm sure my dad was going to come back, and my brother should stay away from the house.
Did you go into the house at all on Sunday?
Yes,
And did you see your parents at all on Sunday
yes.
during the day?
They were watching tennis.
And did you have any conversations with them?
Just briefly. I went in and I said, I decided that I would go in and try to just sort of say hello and just see what the atmosphere was like. And I went in and I said hello, and they didn't answer me. And I just kind of stood there, and they were watching TV. And then I...
So now they're resorting to ignoring you? So they're threatening you, telling you, all this bad stuff's going to happen if you come out with the family secrets. Your mom saying, this family, if you just would have kept your mouth shut, this family would not be broken up and it would have worked out and blah, blah, blah. So all these signs that they're getting from their parents, it's compounding to they're terrified with everything that's going on, and they're taking everything that their parents are saying and seeing it as a negative, because when you're in that situation, that's what you do, and you see all of it as a threat. Everything that they say you can twist and turn into something that feels like a threat to yourself, because that's what you're or what you're used to at this point in time. So, and that's how they make you feel.
went into the kitchen, and was kind of shooken up by that.
Was that unusual for you to speak to them and them to not answer?
Not for my mom, but for my dad, it would be unusual. And so I went back in again to try and get a conversation of just small talk going, just say hello or whatever. And I sat down to watch TV also in the other chair.
What were they watching on TV?
U.S. Open. Or not the U.S. Open, the warm-up for the U.S. Open, whatever. They were watching the top pro tennis tour. I believe it was the tournament before. And I think it was, oh, I'd be guessing, but I think it was Brad Gilbert, but I'm not sure.
They were watching tennis?
Yes.
Okay. So you said you walked back in and sat down?
I walked in and I sat down on the little, like at the love seat thing, the other couch. And at some point, I tried to talk to my dad again and asked him about if he had the number to that unarmed arbitrage camp in Marina Del Rey.
Why did you ask him about that?
Just to get a response. It was just sort of unbearable not to have them say anything at all, and I was feeling like a ghost, like we were already dead. And so I just wanted to talk. And so he had, in the past, been kind of bugging me to try that camp, and I had not gone to that camp. And so I asked for the number this time, and he said, "What does it matter anymore?" And when he said that,
What does it matter anymore? Why is Jose being all like, this is the end already? Like, I don't know. It is weird, right? That the signs that they're getting from the parents, I find that odd.
I just felt there was a problem.
Why, when he said, what did you say, why it doesn't matter anymore? Is that what he said?
And I said, "What does it matter anymore?
What does it matter anymore? Why did that have any meaning to you?
I mean, you're dead. You're not going to be around to be going to unarmed arbitrage camps." And that's the way I took it.
You said your brother had checked in at one point in time during the day, is that correct?
Right.
Was that before or after the conversations you've just told us about with your
Before.
parents? When you talked to Mr. Berman, did you call him or did he call you?
He called me, and I might have called him.
All right. So you had a phone conversation with
I'm just thinking, sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering, with Jose's money and connections, could he possibly have made his boys' homicides look like, an accident or an abduction and they're never found, or who knows what kind of elaborate plan he could have come up with all the money and the connections that he had and the way that he manipulated and coerced people his whole life. He would easily be able to find someone to do something to his boys and them never be seen again or something, I mean, or he could have done it and had it covered by people that he knows, his connections and his money. So either way, it's very possible that Jose could have had plans to end the boys. So I don't want to discount that either. Likely they're probably reading the signs and thinking more so that it's a threat in that he's going to take their lives. But I think in reality, it's probably just a threat, like I'm going to ruin your lives type of threat. But we'll never know. And luckily, Lyle and Erik are here to tell their side of the story.
him.
Right.
And was there anything unusual about that conversation?
No, except that, there was something unusual, which was that my dad had lied. He had called at some point after I had left a message.
Who had called?
Perry had called, returning my message, and my dad had lied and said that I was out and that I couldn't do anything that night. Perry had been returning my message about doing something that night. And
your dad had told him that you were out?
Right.
Were you home all day?
Yes.
So did the fact that your dad had told him that you were out when you were home have any meaning for you?
Oh, yes, it had a great meaning.
What did it mean to you?
I felt that something was going to happen that night, and he wanted me home.
So when you talked to Perry, did you make any plans with him?
Yes. I planned to, he wanted to go, he was going out to dinner with a friend of his, And then he was going over to something called the Taste of LA. And then he wanted me to come with him. I wasn't going to leave without my brother. And I basically told him my brother wasn't home and I was waiting for Erik. And I would meet him at the Taste of LA at least after dinner.
And did you and your brother have plans for that evening? Had you talked about what you were going to do that evening?
Yes. Well, we were going to go to the movies.
So did you wait for your brother to arrive?
Yes.
And when did he get back? If you know. Do you know what time it was?
It was late.
And when Erik came back, did you talk to him about what had happened that day?
Yes. We had a real quick conversation.
What'd you tell him?
I told him what had happened earlier in the day, and I told him about Dad lying about me being home to Perry, and that we had to get out of the house.
How were you feeling at that time?
I was, the fear was growing, and it just sort of was getting out of control for me, and I was feeling very, like, crumbling. And the night before, after my mom had said that,
Crumbling. He felt crumbling. His mom said the family would have worked out if you had kept your mouth shut, talking to Erik, and now his dad is saying, what does it matter anymore regarding tennis camps and things like that, and also this whole weird thing with what he just said. Now I lost my train of thought of what he just said.
How were you feeling at that time?
I was, the fear was growing, and it just sort of was getting out of control for me, and I was feeling.
Oh, he lied about Erik or Lyle not being home to his friend Perry Berman. So there's that also. So it is odd behavior from the parents, which makes you wonder what their line of thinking was and why did they lie? And why are they saying such harsh words? It almost does seem like the parents might have it out for them for something, either ruining their life or taking their lives. I don't know. But it does seem odd.
I'm very, like, crumbling. And the night before, after my mom had said that, I felt like things were sort of, I was not in control. I was sort of slipping away, and I was trying to be, I was trying to help my brother by being not as hysterical as he was and trying to say that things were going to be all right, and I was losing that. And especially since my dad lied about me being home, I felt that something was going to happen Sunday, and I was scared. I wanted to get out of the house.
So did you tell your parents you were going to leave?
Yes. I went in the house and wanted to tell my mom that we were leaving. And she told me that we couldn't go and to stay there in the house and not go out. And I told her why, and I was supposed to meet someone at the movies, and that I was late and that we had to leave, and she just had no answer. She was just sort of confused, and I don't think she expected that I was going out.
Was it unusual that your parents would tell you you couldn't go out on a Sunday evening like that?
Yes, it would be unusual.
Was your brother there when you were having this conversation with your mother?
My brother was there at some point.
Where was this conversation?
In the foyer, kind of in between the den and the foyer.
Was your dad there?
No, but my dad came in as soon as he heard the argument, and he came in, sort of pushed my mom aside a little. And
what was your mom acting like at this point in time? Was this her usual rage, or was she calm? Or
no, my mom was very sort of real balled up and tense the whole weekend, and I really only had those two conversations with her, but very cold. Seemed to be also really similar to the way I was, tense and I think anticipating. That's the way I read her.
Okay, so she tells you you can't go to the movies. Is that correct?
Right.
And what do you say to her?
Well, I said to her that we had plans. I was supposed to meet a friend, and we were late, and that thing, and she had no answer for that and was sort of stammering, and that's when my dad came in and sort of pushed her aside. And that's when I noticed that my brother was next to me or behind me, because he didn't talk to me. He spoke to my brother, and told him to go upstairs to his room and wait for him while he finished his movie. And then my brother like didn't move, didn't know what to do, and I said, no, you're not going to touch my brother. And we had a big argument. It was just a couple sentences, and
What were those sentences? What was he saying?
I don't really remember the sentences, but I was saying that he wasn't going to touch Erik, and he was just ignoring me and telling my brother to his face to get upstairs and wait for him. And my brother left and went upstairs.
And what happened?
My mother came. My dad left, went in the den, and my mother was sort of still standing there and said something to me about that I had ruined the family, and I was just not saying.
How did Lyle ruin the family? Lyle isn't the one that's abusing himself and his brother. How did Lyle ruin the family? Tell me. Anybody?
Anything, and then my dad came out and took her by the arm and said, come on, Kitty, and they walked into the den, and then my dad closed the doors. And
What did you think was happening?
I was sure that was it. They were in the den, and my dad closed the doors, and I didn't believe that Dad was going to finish any movie or talk to Erik. I thought he was just buying time, and I realized that they had been waiting for Erik to get home, like I had been, and I just freaked out.
What did you think they were doing in the den? What did you think was going to happen?
I thought they were going ahead with the plan to kill us.
Then?
Yes.
So what did you do?
I ran upstairs to tell my brother that it was happening now, and that this was it, and they were gonna kill us. And I met him at the top of the stairs. He hadn't gone in his room, and I remember sort of being surprised by the fact that he was at the top of the stairs. And I said something to him along those lines, that it's happening and they're gonna kill us. And he said something about that he wasn't gonna wait for Dad in his room, and that we had to do something. I don't remember exactly who said what, but at some point I said, I'm gonna get my gun. And he said he would get his gun. And
How did you feel then?
just, it's hard to describe how I felt, but I had to run as fast as I could. And
He was acting out of instinct and survival mode. That's why he can't describe it. He was acting in survival mode rather than thinking logically, like, oh, did this mean that? Or, he wasn't analyzing anymore. He was in, I got to protect myself and my brother mode. And he was ready to do that at all costs. And I commend him for being the one to step up and say, let's get something done, because our parents are acting strange and very scary. So I commend him for being the one to say, step up and do something. And for yelling back at Jose, saying, you're not going to touch my brother, because he knew exactly what was going to happen if Erik went in that room. So I am, as I'm listening to this for the very first time, I think Lyle is a hero. Just going to say that.
my life was sort of slipping away, and that we were gonna die.
So did you go get your gun?
I did.
And was it in the guest house? The gun?
It was in my guest house, and I ran. I got it. And
Where
I
did
ran.
you go?
Huh?
Where did you go?
I ran to where we had the ammunition
Which was where?
in my brother's car in the front.
Did you see your brother there?
Yes,
Did you load your gun?
and we did.
Did he load his?
Um,
Or did you see?
I just grabbed a bunch of ammunition out of the box, and I was giving him ammunition, and we were just loading as fast as possible. And
Do you remember how many shells you loaded? Do you know?
I don't remember. I remember pulling out all kinds of shells and just loading my gun and having shells on me.
Again, he's acting on survival mode. He's on adrenaline. He's acting out of instinct, survive, get through this moment. in time. He's not counting the ammo. He's not checking to see what his brother's doing. He is focused with a plan to protect them. So, and working on survival mode. So, that's my opinion.
What did you do then?
We went. My brother had, I guess, got outside through the study doors because he ran toward the study window door. And you had to kind of go over this. I think you had to. We went over the little concrete thing. It was over to the side of the door on the left, and we went through that door and we just sprinted to the room, hoping to get there when they were not expecting us.
And what did you do?
My brother got there first, and we just burst through the doors, and I started firing.
Was the room lit?
No,
Could you see?
no, it was dark. The lights were out, and I remember seeing. I don't remember too well, but I remember seeing a shadow right off to the right, and my brother over to the left. He ran off into that direction, and I started firing immediately in the direction of whoever was standing right there.
Was the TV on? Do you remember? Was there any light in the room?
The TV, I remember, I found out later that the TV was on. I don't actually remember the TV being on, but there was probably light in the room from the TV.
When you started firing, do you remember if your parents were standing or seated, or do you have a clear memory of that?
I remember who I realized was my dad at some point, sort of coming forward in my direction. So he was standing. And I remember firing directly at him. I believe he fell back.
Was there a lot of firing going on?
Yeah, my brother was, I guess, firing, and there was things shattering, and the noise was phenomenal. And we fired lots, many times, and there were just glass, and you could hear things breaking, and you could hear the ringing noises from the booms, and there was the smoke from the guns, and it was basically just chaos, and I really didn't know who was firing at who and what was going on. I just was doing firing my gun, and that's what I just was trying to think about that and not freezing.
Do you remember firing a very close shot at your father?
I believe so.
At what part of his body?
From the side, behind, kind of. I ended up there. I don't remember the shot, really, but I remember the picture.
The picture you saw here? Are you talking about your dad's head wound?
Yes.
And do you think you did that?
Yes.
At some point, was your gun empty?
Yes.
And
He's getting emotional thinking about this. Like, he was able to explain it without the emotion because he's probably had to multiple times already at this point in his life. He's had to explain it to lawyers, law enforcement, all sorts of people, the Dr. Oziel. Um, and so he's had to explain it. And when you are abused, you become detached from your emotions when you talk about those kinds of situations. It's almost like, yeah, it's like when in the beginning of this stream when I was talking about my ex, it's like, yeah, I can talk about it without getting upset or emotional. It doesn't really like bring up those emotions unless I really allow it to. But for most trauma survivors, we can talk about it without the emotion because we're so we've that's how we deal with it. We turn those emotions off so that we don't deal with it. Basically, that's our body's way of dealing with that trauma.
was there something about your mother that you learned then, either through Erik, or you saw something or heard something?
Could see sort of behind my dad, really barely, but could see somebody moving, seemed like moving in the direction of where my brother should be. And so I reloaded.
You reloaded? Is that yes?
Yes.
And what did you do after you reloaded?
Okay. Uh, this is interesting. He's now getting emotional talking about taking his mother out, whereas Jose, he could say it without any emotion whatsoever. So now he's getting emotional talking about reloading the gun and going back to take out his mom.
I ran around and shot my mom.
Where did you shoot her?
It's reached over. I shot her close.
Was that the last shot that was fired?
This is probably why it's so traumatizing because he was up close to his mom and probably saw her face while he did it. Whereas, as he was explaining, when he just came into the room and shooting, he really didn't see who or what was happening. He was just like, yeah, I just saw a figure and I just shot and it was standing. And now he knows it was Jose. Whereas, in the moment, he's just shooting and in survival mode. But this time, he goes back, he reloads, he has the capacity to think about what he's doing, maybe a little bit, because he had to walk away. He still reloads and goes back and takes out Kitty, who was still alive but badly injured at the time.
Is that yes?
Yes. Yes.
What did you do after that?
Kitty was supposedly crawling towards Erik too, so it might be another reason to fear. I don't know.
I dropped my gun and I went into the foyer. And I sat against the wall.
Where was your brother?
I don't really remember. I remember seeing him later against the other wall.
In the foyer?
Yes.
Did you stay there for a while?
We stayed, I'm not exactly sure how long, but I remember thinking that I had to talk to my brother and seeing him and sort of just being against the wall and just not being able to talk to him. Didn't have the energy. And so I don't know exactly how long we were there, but several minutes and maybe longer.
And at some point, were you able to move?
Yes, yes. At some point we got up and
Were you expecting something to happen?
yes.
What were you expecting to happen?
Well, at that point we knew the police hadn't come, so we weren't expecting anything.
Earlier, had you expected something?
I believe they had expected the police to just show up. People actually did hear the gunshots, but thought it was like fireworks or somebody's TV or something, so nobody actually called the police when they did hear the shots fired.
When you were sitting there?
Yeah, I expected the police. That's what I wanted to talk to my brother about, was the fact that the police were coming.
Why did you think the police were coming?
Well, obviously the police were going to be there, within a few seconds or however long a time it takes them to get there. And I was afraid to talk to him. I wanted to know what my brother was going to say.
Why did you?
This also shows how juvenile they are in their thinking, because in a lot of instances where someone might take someone's life and then report it, usually they're the ones reporting it, oftentimes. Like, hey, I just found my so-and-so at the bottom of the stairs, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But um, they are actually the ones who did it. So it kind of goes to show that they didn't realize that the cops wouldn't show unless somebody called them. And none of the neighbors did. It wasn't on them to call. So usually it's the person who finds the body And that is oftentimes the perpetrator, but not always. But in this case, yes.
Did you think the police were going to come?
Why did I think they were going to come? Because people would call the police, or they would hear the noise themselves. People roam in Beverly, in the flats, and the police station's only a couple blocks away. But I really wasn't thinking all this. I was just thinking about what my brother was going to say to the police.
Why were you worried about what your brother was going to say to the police?
I don't know, I just remember sitting against the wall worried that I didn't want him to say everything that had happened. I was maybe say nothing, maybe, I just wasn't sure, and I didn't want him to talk about everything that had happened.
What do you mean everything that had happened?
Family.
I didn't want him to talk about what happened, his relationship with his dad or my relationship with my dad.
So even after all of that, Lyle is still protecting the family name, which is crazy, and protecting Jose in the process, protecting Jose of all the immense amount of sins that he committed in his life against his children.
So you remember thinking that, but you couldn't. Did you
Actually,
ever?
he didn't know about my relationship with my dad, but I just felt like I didn't want that to come out.
Were you able to tell him that at that time?
No, not at that time. At that time, I didn't say anything. I just sat against the wall and waited and figured, well, I just didn't, I don't know, I was so exhausted, I couldn't talk to him. I remember trying, and him being...
Adrenaline. The adrenaline is leaving, and now you're exhausted after that traumatic moment.
Against the wall, and me just sort of sitting there, stupid, like I couldn't move, paralyzed. And then at some point, we did get up, and we talked about the fact that nobody had come. And so then we started to talk about what we wanted to do. And I don't know exactly what we decided at that point. I know we decided that we should leave and get out of the house right away in case the police were still coming or somebody would call late or something. I was just didn't want to be in the house at that point. And then we decided to pick up the shells.
Why were you going to pick up the shells?
Because of fingerprints. It's probably sounds like my idea, but I don't really know. So
he doesn't even remember where that came from, but at some point in time after the dust settled and their adrenaline started to decrease and they started thinking more rationally, they were like, oh crap, police can probably identify us by our fingerprints on these casings. We have to go back and collect them. So logical brain starts kicking in, and they start thinking, let's go grab those casings.
And I don't really remember picking them up too well, but we did pick them up.
Did you go back into the room where your parents were?
Yes. And we turned on the lights.
Did you look at your parents?
I didn't.
Do you have any memory of seeing what your parents looked like that night after you shot them?
Just from one or two of the photos.
But do you remember it from seeing them?
No.
Did you look at them?
No.
So you picked up the shells?
We picked up the shells, and somehow we ended up getting all of them, apparently. But I really wasn't too sure about the idea of whether it would matter to pick up the shells with fingerprints. So we did it pretty hurriedly. So I remember being surprised later that there were no shell casings at all. But we did get them, and we went out. I guess we didn't put them in anything. I guess we just grabbed them, and then we immediately grabbed the guns and left the house out the front and went to my brother's car. And
where did you go from there?
From there, the first thing we did was leave and get out of the area. And actually I was driving, I took a right, and I believe I went to the next street.
Where did you go after that?
I'm not really sure, but I think we went to the movie theater. We had decided, I remember Erik saying, what are we going to say? And I really didn't know what we were going to say, but the only thing that we could say was that we were at the movies together, which was not a great thing to say, but that's all we could say. And so we decided that we should go and get tickets, because the police were going to ask us when likely for tickets, and we want to show them tickets. And then we also decided we obviously had to get rid of the guns. So at some point we did that. I don't know. I remember doing them, but I don't remember exactly which one first. I think we went to the movie theater first.
What did you do at the movie theater?
We went and parked on the side and ran in, and there was a very short few people in line, and we asked the person for tickets to the show that we knew was going to take place that night around 8 o'clock or 8:15, whatever was on the board. And we asked for the movie License to Kill, because we had seen it. And she said that had been sold out for that show. And we asked for, we said Batman, because that was the only other movie we had seen. And then she wouldn't sell us the tickets to the Batman show for that show because it was almost over or was ending. She said that she could only sell the tickets like 20 minutes into the show, and I told her we really need tickets for that show. And she wouldn't sell us tickets to that show. So I just went ahead and asked for tickets to the next show, and hoping that there was no time on them, and there was a time on them. So I believe my brother had the tickets, so I think he just threw them away, and we left.
And where did you go after that?
Again, I really don't remember if we went to do the guns at that point. We may have. I'm pretty sure we did, and we went.
What area did you get rid of the guns?
Yes.
What area did you get rid
We
of?
went to the area that I normally took to get over into the valley, Coldwater Canyon, where we knew where there were mountains, some place where we could put the guns. So we drove up to Coldwater and onto Mulholland at some point, and drove along there until I found a spot that seemed like I could pull over and we could put the guns down the mountainside.
And who took the guns out?
My brother.
And what did you do while he was taking the guns out?
I just circled the car around because we had to come back the other way because I was still going to try and make it to meet Perry if I could. And so I circled around, and he was finished at that point. And he had run down and put the guns down and come back up. So he got in the car, and we continued driving to try and make it to the Taste of L.A.
And did something happen on the way to the Taste of L.A.?
My brother had some blood on his pants, and I also realized we still had the shells. And so we stopped at a gas station along the way, and the big dumpsters. We just pulled over and did the best we could. Me searching the car for all the shells and anything else that might be in there. And him changing his pants. And I may have changed something also. I don't remember exactly.
How did you happen to have clothes in the car?
Well, his car was filled with clothes, tennis clothes, shoes, just sports stuff, as well as other clothes. It was like a second room for Erik, the back of his hatchback. And so we just pulled things out of there, what we thought would look possible. And so after we did that as fast as we could, because we were trying to get to meet Perry.
How were you feeling at that time?
Numb. I was just feeling numb, exhausted, heavy, still in just shock that really that the police hadn't come, and that we were sort of, now this was going on, and trying to think clearly as to, I really felt there was a small chance that they weren't going to figure out what happened. And so
What did you think about what you had done?
I didn't really think about it at that point. I was sort of just lost and numb and thinking about what we were doing.
After you changed your clothes, did you then go to the Taste of L.A.?
After we changed our clothes, we went straight to the Taste of L.A. We got a little bit lost, but we found it.
Who got out of the car when you got there?
I got out of the car.
How was Erik doing at that point?
He was not doing well. When we left the house, I could barely drive his stick shift, and was sort of trembling from just having been in the room, picking up the shells and leaving. And he was in worse shape, really, mostly because he was crying and just saying, oh my God, and shaking. And he was still in pretty bad shape even after we had done the thing at the gas station, and now he was at the Taste of L.A., and I was a little bit concerned of what was going to happen when I found Perry and Erik in the car in that shape. But still, I felt like I wanted to get Perry for some reason.
Why did you want to get to Perry? What was so important about that?
Well, my brother was asking me the same question, and I felt just like I wanted to go back with somebody else and not have to call the police myself. And I just felt like the police weren't going to show up, and I was going to have to eventually call. And maybe Perry coming with me would be easier.
Easier in what way?
Just comfort, just there. I was going to have to talk to the police anyway myself, and then Perry wasn't going to be able to help me through any of it. But just have my, he was the only friend I had in the area. And he wasn't the closest friend in the world, but he was somebody that was somewhat close. So, there's no good reason, just basically some comfort to go with me, just so we weren't alone. For some reason, my brother was no comfort for me.
He wanted support. He wanted someone that could support him. Lyle was there to support Erik, if you notice. Like, he's always the one leading and protecting Erik. So it's no wonder he wants someone for his support, someone to support him, because he's keeping himself and Erik together. So he needs someone to keep him together, if that makes sense.
I was starting to feel the loss, and
What do you mean starting to feel the loss?
I was feeling a distance from Erik for some reason. I remember feeling like what we had done was really bad, and feeling real dirty about it, or just kind of bad. And my brother was bad also, and just not wanting to be, the blood on his pants, and just not, he was no comfort for me. It was more like reminding me, and I was trying to think about what was coming. And I felt like Perry, I needed somebody there, and other than my brother, who was really just a mess. And so I went and tried to find him, and he wasn't there.
Did you call him?
I called him. He wasn't there, and so I called him at his house, and he was at his house, and he said that he had waited, and we hadn't shown up, so he left. And I told him I really got to talk to him, and could he meet me somewhere and we could talk. And I believe he suggested this restaurant in Beverly Hills called the Cheesecake Factory, and I said, okay, that was good, and we would meet him there, and however long it took us to get there. And then I believe I called him again a little bit later.
Do you remember for sure whether you called him a second time?
Not for sure, but I know that I did.
How do you know that you did?
Because I've seen the records.
But you don't have a clear memory on your own?
No.
Did you then drive back and meet him at the Cheesecake Factory?
No.
Why not?
Well, we wanted to drive back and meet him at the Cheesecake Factory, but in driving there, I started to lose control of myself, and which was, I was afraid of that was going to happen. And the whole thing was Perry was in the hopes that I could hold it together long enough to be able to meet with Perry and go back to the house, and that was clearly not going to happen. And I was starting to shake, and I may have been crying, I don't remember, but I remember feeling, both with myself and with my brother, there was no way we could meet Perry, and him not know that something terrible had happened. So I didn't want to cancel the idea, so I drove around. I remember driving around for a little while first, and then at some point it was just started to fall apart more, and so I said, nothing I could do. I just have to forget about Perry and go in, call the police myself.
So did you go back to the house? Is that yes?
Yes.
Did you go into the house?
Yes.
Did you go into the room where your parents were?
My brother went in the room, and I went in the room and started screaming, and I went in the room to get him and pull him out. And I did pull him out, and I believe I went upstairs to call.
Called the police?
Called the police.
Is that the 911 tape that's been played in court?
Right.
And on that tape, you're crying?
Yes.
Was that real?
Yes.
Why were you crying?
Well, I don't know. That's why I was calling. Was because I was crying, and
What were you crying
I
about?
don't know if I was crying before I went in the house or not. If I was just totally shaken, and
What
but after I went in the room and my brother's reactions, I don't know. I was crying. And
Why?
Why?
What was upsetting you?
Just the shock. Just not believing that this was happening to me, and that my parents were dead, and that I was about to call the police, and just yeah, it's really hard to describe the weekend and the stress and the fear and nervousness and caving in feelings. I was really marginal throughout as it got closer to what actually happened, and by then I was just really raw and just crying for crying's sake. I don't know, crumbling.
At that point, he's probably exhausted from feeling all of the emotions he's been feeling. He's been terrified the entire weekend, thinking that his parents are after him and are going to hurt him and his brother. And there's a lot of stress there. And yeah, he's constantly stressed 24/7. And they're not sleeping because they think something's going to happen at night. So he's not sleeping. He's extremely stressed out. At this point in time, it's like all that adrenaline is leaving him, and it's all settling in like, "Oh, crap. This is really happening now." Like before I was on autopilot. Now I'm dealing with it. Scary stuff, man. Trauma is scary. Abuse is no joke, man. Don't abuse people. It's just not right. Don't do it. It causes so many severe psychological issues. I know you, my viewers, aren't abusers, but I'm just throwing that out in the universe. Anyone out there who wants to abuse, don't do it.
And I remember my brother apparently went back in the room, started screaming again. I was telling him to get out of the room.
And you called the police, and then what happened?
I called the police, and the lady was, I don't remember, it was a lady, I believe, that answered the phone. And
Do you remember that from then or from hearing the tape?
really from the tape, yeah, because I don't really remember what I said other than telling my brother to get out of the room. I remember that.
Did the police come in at some point?
No, they called again and told me to come out of the house. They wouldn't come in.
And did you come out of the house?
We came out of the house, and they just took over.
And at some point, did they take you down to the police station?
Yes.
Were you interviewed by Sergeant Edmonds?
Yes.
And did you admit to him that you had killed your parents?
No. No.
Why not?
We had decided before that we wouldn't.
Who went in first?
My brother.
And you had talked about what you were going to tell the police?
We had, before I called police when we were driving around, and then when we were in the car, I believe it was when we were in the car, I asked him what he was going to do, because he was really hysterical, crying on the ground, rolling around. He was really, I think it was from seeing my parents more than anything. But I asked him what he wanted to do, and something like that, and he's, whether he was going to go ahead with what we had said or whether he was going to tell him, because if he was going to tell him, I didn't want to go in and give this stupid story that, and just, if he was going to tell him, then I wanted to know so that I could tell him also. And he said that he would, no, it's okay. I don't want to tell, we'll just say what we said. We were going to say something to that effect. And I said, okay, well, I wasn't too sure about whether he was really going to be able to hold it together. So I told him, you just let me know, you try and go in and talk first, and you let me know if it's okay.
Did you think he was going to be able to tell these lies?
I did not think he was going to be able to.
Why?
Because he was in very bad shape afterwards, and I was trying to get him to relax and keep him together and not let him know how it was affecting me, and just kind of keep him relaxed, and I couldn't. He was really all over the place, and the police officer there was trying to help us also. And so I really didn't have a lot of faith that he was going to be able to keep the story, but it was such an, I was just hoping that he would, because I really didn't want to have to talk about it all.
And after your brother talked to Sergeant Edmonds, did he say anything to you?
My brother?
Yes.
My brother came out and said, it's okay, we can talk to him. And I believe he also came over and said something else. It's, you can, I don't remember exactly, but he whispered something else about that I could stay with what we had talked about. So I did that. And I was nervous going in also, because I figured, these are police officers and they're going to know I'm lying, and I just felt they were going to know. And I had no idea how my brother got through it. So I went in and I talked to him, and he asked me a bunch of questions. And I just tried to, I really wasn't sure what I was saying, but I was answering some of them and trying to keep with the story that we had made up, and also just whatever I could do to make him not think that it was us, basically.
At some point you left the police station, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you realize later that you had left something back at the house or near the house that could show that you were the ones who killed your parents?
Yes.
Did you return to the house?
We returned to the house. The next one, they kept our car and taped it in, which I had felt they were going to do. And just that night I stayed at Mark Heffernan's, and
What time did you go back?
I'm not sure, very early in the morning.
And did you ask if you could get into your car? Or did you get into your car?
No, I didn't ask if I could get in my car. I don't think I got to ask anything. I think they sent us away, sent me away. I had taken a cab over, I think, yeah. And
Did you go back again?
then I went back again, and somewhere around 8 o'clock or something, when it was a little bit more reasonable time. And then I just sort of said I wanted to get in a few things. I believe I said I wanted to get a few things out of the house, and was trying to find a way to get over to the car to search it myself before they did, because I knew that as soon as I searched the car, I just had a feeling that that was going to be it, because the car was going to have wrappings from when we bought it, or extra shells or whatever. I mean, I just had not had time, or the light even, to search it real well at the gas station. It was kind of like a frenzied thing trying to get to Perry's. I hadn't really thought about it like I did, and then that night I said, I thought we were going to jail. And so
Did you get back into the car?
I did.
And did you find any other wrappings or shells or anything?
The guy let me search the car to just get a few things, and I was able to do a pretty good job. And I did find quite a few things.
And did you take them?
Yes.
And those things were all in the car at the point in time that you called the police the night before?
Yes.
Your Honor, could we break at this point?
All right. It's 4:35, and we'll take our recess for the afternoon and for the...
All right, we're going to swap to this video now. So now it's just another video. That's just where the split happened. So we're going to continue on with his testimony, but obviously this is a different day. He has a different outfit on. So let's...
On the witness stand, you're still under oath. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Joseph Lyle Menendez.
And you may continue your direct examination.
Thank you. Mr. Menendez, after your parents died, did your relatives start arriving in town?
Yes.
And where do most of your relatives live?
New Jersey, most of them.
And some live in other states?
Florida and a few other states. Arizona.
And did they stay in the same location you stayed?
We all stayed at the Lodge Hotel at first.
And did you move to some other location?
And then we moved to the Bel Air Hotel.
Did all of your relatives move, or just you and your brother move?
I don't think, just my brother and I moved, and where the family would meet and sort of gather sort of changed to that hotel, but I think they still had the rooms they reserved at the Bel Air, pretty sure.
And who made the decision that you should go to the Bel Air Hotel?
One of my dad's cousins.
And why did he want you to stay there?
I believe he thought it was more secure and more conducive to open family gatherings, since they did have a large room kind of separated from the other guests.
And several days after your relatives arrived, did you have a conversation with your Aunt Marta?
Yes.
And what is her relationship? She's your aunt. Whose sister is she?
My dad's sister.
And did that conversation concern the financial aspect of your mother and father's situation?
Yes.
And where did that conversation take place?
That took place at one of the hotels. I'm not sure if it was her room or my room.
Was she discussing the size of your parents' estate?
Yes, she had a whole list of
And,
papers and things to show us.
and did that discussion also concern whether there was any insurance?
Yes.
Now, when your Aunt Marta was telling you about the information about the estate, did you make any comment to her with regard to the will?
Yes, we told her.
Sustained.
What did you say?
Sustained.
Before your parents died, what did you believe with regard to whether you were in or out of the will?
We were out of the will.
And how is it that you came to believe that?
That's what my dad told me, that I was out of the will.
Did he explain to you why?
No, but I sort of realized it. He mentioned it every so often, and I realized it as we went along.
Why did you think?
I think it's a control tactic, something that he can hold over their heads, like, I own this house and you're under my roof and you do what I say type of thing. So it's one of those control tactics that parents use to, and narcissists, control abusers, can use to get people to do what they want. And I'm just saying parents because I use that example. You live under my roof, you live under my rules, type of thing, which is similar, I would say.
This is just something that you figured out on your own, something you
No,
believed?
this was things that he would say about my girlfriends and my girlfriend's situations led me to believe he just didn't want them to get his money. And so I didn't see it as a permanent situation, just until he felt that I married properly.
And did he have more than one discussion with you about being out of the will?
They weren't really discussions. My dad would just say that if he was sarcastic and maybe even angry.
And over what period of time have he been telling you that you were out of the will, if you remember?
Since the beginning of '89, maybe even a little before.
And did you express this state of mind to your aunt?
Yes.
And did your aunt tell you something about an insurance policy with the company, with your dad's company?
Objection, Kirsten.
State of mind again, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Did you have any information before your parents died with regard to a $5 million insurance policy that your father's company was to pay for him?
Yes.
And how is it that you had information about that policy?
Just through things that were said in the house. Mostly my mother arguing with him about the appointments that he continued to miss or cancel.
What did you believe about the $5 million insurance policy? Did you believe that it was in effect or not
At what time?
prior to your parents' death?
It wasn't in effect because he hadn't taken the physical.
And were there discussions in your home about why he hadn't taken the physical?
Yes.
And
So in Lyle's mind, that $5 million insurance policy it wasn't active. It wasn't a good policy because Jose hadn't followed through with his doctor's appointments that he was supposed to have in order for the policy to kick in. So therefore, it's not a motive. The $5 million insurance policy that wasn't in existence is not a motive.
what were the reasons stated why he hadn't taken the physical?
Objection, Kirsten.
State of mind again, Your Honor.
Can you spell out what time frame you're talking about in these conversations, please?
Did your father have some health problems in January of 1989?
Yes.
What kind of health problems did he have?
He had some I don't know if I'm using the right words, but heart palpitations of some sort in the night. And so to be safe, he checked into a hospital near Pico Boulevard. And I found out, I believe, the next day, which was Super Bowl, I guess Super Bowl Sunday. And so I was with some friends at the house, and then I left because I found out my dad was in the hospital, and I went and I spent the Super Bowl with him, and it was some sort of a heart trouble, which he was keeping secret.
Did he express to you why he wanted to keep it secret?
Yes, because
State of mind again, Your Honor.
All right, it's not received for the truth of what was said, just to reflect the state of mind of the witness. And again, could you specify when this occurred?
After your father had these heart problems and was in the hospital, were you given some instructions with regard to whether this was to be talked about openly or not?
yes, he was extremely concerned that it would get out that he may have some heart trouble, and the stock would drop in his company significantly, since the whole house of cards was held up by him, he felt. And were they to find out that the chairman, chief executive, had health problems, the stock would drop. And so,
Really? I mean, we all have health issues, and uh, everybody goes to the doctor. It's not, I don't think people would just rush to go take their stock, sell or trade in their stocks for what they're worth and up and leave the company just because Jose has some medical procedures done or whatever. Give me a break. Like, the world didn't revolve around Jose, but in Jose's mind it did. Apparently, we're finding.
I believe nobody at his company knew, maybe his secretary, and just myself and Mom, Erik.
And was there any connection between these heart problems and him getting the insurance policy?
Yes, the only connection was that he felt that he wanted to give as much time as he could, a little more time. I guess they wanted him to take the physical in the spring when he was supposed to take it for the insurance policy. And he was putting it off and just wanted to let as much time go by as he could.
Is this what he was saying to you?
This is what he was saying to my mother when she was really pretty obsessively badgering him about the appointments that he was missing, and that I guess someone at the company was setting up for him, and he just wouldn't go.
So this was a topic of conversation on more than one occasion between your mother and father?
Yes.
And when your mother would talk to him about taking the physical and urging him to do so, would he use the health thing as a reason for not doing it? Or?
Yes, and he was a little suspicious of her.
How do you mean he was a little suspicious of her?
Because she was so insistent that he take the physical, and, she was unstable. And he was.
Meaning what? Like, she would take his life for the insurance policy? Maybe he thought Kitty might end him for the $5 million if he took the doctor's appointment. I wonder.
Sarcastically implying that maybe, he was just seemed to be implying that maybe he shouldn't take the physical if she wanted him to take the physical so bad.
Sort of joking with her about it?
Yeah.
And after your father died, did your Aunt Marta suggest to you that you should be able to get this insurance? That the company should pay off on this policy?
Yes, she said she was the one that arranged the insurance. Oh, you mean $5 million?
Right.
She didn't seem to understand what I was trying to explain to her. She seemed to feel that the company should pay it anyway, since she said it was in the contract. Even though he didn't take the physical, who cares? He would have passed, and she should get it. So I told her I didn't think so.
So did she then continue negotiations with the company with regard to that?
Yes.
Sustain the answer, sir.
Did she report back to you that she was still attempting to get the company to pay off on that policy?
Yes.
And did she tell you about another insurance policy, one that she'd written for your dad?
Yes.
And did you know about that one before your parents died?
No.
And do you know?
So again, it cannot be motive for the boys. So far, 2 insurance policies that we know of that the boys didn't know were even in existence, or they weren't even active. So therefore, the money's not a motive.
Know what the amount was on that one?
Sustained.
After your parents died, did your Aunt Marta tell you how much that insurance policy was?
She did.
And how much was it?
I believe it was, between my brother and myself, a total of $650,000, I believe.
And had you ever heard about that policy before their death?
No.
You said that you believed that you were out of the will when your parents died. Is that correct?
Right.
Did your relatives find a will for your parents?
Yes, they did.
And was it a new will or one that had been made up some time ago?
No, it wasn't. Over 10 years old, I believe.
And did they continue looking for a newer will?
Yes, they also believed that there could be a new will, and so we were looking for a new will.
At some point, did you receive some information about some information in a computer that seemed to relate to a will?
Did I find some information?
Did you receive some? Did somebody tell you about
Yes.
that? And was this computer in your parents' bedroom?
That was my mother's IBM computer.
And did you have a computer of your own in the house?
Yes.
And what kind of computer did you have?
That was the Macintosh that I bought at Princeton.
And when you bought the Macintosh at Princeton, who used it primarily?
Mostly my friends used it. That pretty much didn't get used, actually. But if someone wanted to do a paper and they knew how to use it, it was fine with me.
And did you ever use the IBM computer that was in your parents' bedroom?
I didn't know how to use it because you need to know the special. It seemed complicated.
Did your dad use it?
No, he didn't know how to use it either.
Who used it?
Mom had some knowledge on how to use it. Not a whole lot, but she was able to do some work with it.
And did you receive some information while you were still in California about efforts to pull information out of the computer, out of the IBM computer?
Yes.
All right, one step at a time. Objection overruled. Next one step.
Yes.
And your parents died on Sunday, is that correct?
Yes.
And when did you leave for New Jersey?
Friday, I believe.
Between that Friday, which was the 20th, that Sunday, which was the 20th, and the following Friday, is that when you received information about what was in the computer?
Yes.
And what information did you receive? What information did you have about who was looking in the computer?
A bunch of my relatives. I know Carlos Baralt, the executor, was looking and was working on the computer. My Aunt Joan, my Aunt Pat, I believe my Aunt Terry, and a cousin of my dad's, Carlos Menendez. And there may have been probably my Uncle Brian also, actually. There may have been more, but I don't know.
So everybody was...
I spent a few hours checking all the files and going through it.
And were you given some information in terms of what they were able to find in the computer?
Yes.
And what were you told? State of mind again, Your Honor.
Could you be a little more specific as to when and where and who said the same?
Between the...
If you're following the line of questioning, then you don't need to be specific because she just said it in the previous question. But, okay.
Sunday your parents died and the Friday that you left for New Jersey, did you receive some information with regard to what your relatives had found in the computer?
Yes.
And do you remember exactly when that was?
That was during family discussions we had after they had looked through the computer, which was, I think it was later in the week, but it could have been as early as Wednesday. I'm not sure.
And did you receive this information when you were sitting with a group of people, or was it just one person talking to you?
It was just a group of people, and especially Carlos Menendez had a big interest. And, everybody had worked on it, the computer, and so it was being talked about, and I was there.
And what did they say about what they found in the computer?
That they had found these, basically that there was nothing in the computer of any interest other than these 3 entries.
And what were the 3 entries, if you remember?
My memory is it was Menendez, and then the word will, and then the word list.
And were these 3 entries the focal point of the interest of the relatives in terms of spending all of the time trying to get the information out of the computer?
That's what they were basically talking about, was those 3 entries, yeah.
And what did they tell you about those entries?
Just that they had found the 3 entries, at least those are the ones that they were discussing, and that there was nothing in the entries, that they had pulled up the files, and that they were basically completely empty, and it seemed like somebody at one point had been doing something with those entries, and I guess had either erased it or something had happened, because there were just like very little bytes under the entries.
All right, this conversation, again, is not received for the truth of the matter stated, just to reflect the state of mind of the witness.
Thank you. Was there any discussion about whether, if there was a will in the computer, it would be a valid will?
Yes.
And this was still in California prior to you returning to New Jersey on Friday?
Yes.
And what was that discussion with regard to the validity of the will?
That was, essentially, I was just listening mostly to Carlos Baralt, who was the executor. He was the only one handling the affairs of the estate. And it was, he said that a will on a computer would not be valid whether they found one or not. And he said because there had to be a signature and witnesses, and it was, basically he said that it was interesting, but that he wasn't going to waste any more time on it. And
were some arrangements made for someone else to see if they could retrieve the information?
yes.
Okay, and were those arrangements made while you were still in California or after you went to New Jersey, or do you know?
I'm not sure exactly when.
Okay. And what arrangements were you aware of at that time?
Well, really shortly after that, either in California or right when they got back, I believe. Somebody wanted an expert to check the computer more thoroughly, and it was Eileen's responsibility. She's a cousin of mine who works with IBM, to find somebody, she lives in New Jersey, but to find somebody in California who could come out inexpensively and just double check the computer, I guess.
Did you make any efforts before you left California to find out what was in the computer?
No.
And when you found out that Eileen was going to make some arrangements, did you talk to her about it or ask to be present?
No, I found out about the arrangements all in, I believe, the same conversation in New Jersey.
Okay.
I don't know if the arrangements were made in California, but I found out about them in New Jersey.
And how is it that you found out that Eileen was going to have somebody come and look at the computer? Was
There
it
was-
discussion just with you and Eileen, or were there other people around?
No, there were, I believe we were at my Aunt Terry's house, and there was a big, Eileen was very upset, and there was a big problem, and basic discussion about the fact, how upset Eileen was that she had set up somebody to go look at the computer, and my dad's cousin had, behind her back, set up his own expert to look through the computer. And she had gone through all this trouble, and why was he doing that? And that's where I learned it for the first time.
And what's your dad's cousin's name?
Carlos Menendez.
And so was this a fairly big event in terms of her being upset? Was she making a
It was
big
fairly
deal of
big.
it?
My Aunt Terry and my Uncle Carlos, they were both the executors, actually, stayed out of it completely because it was more a personal thing than anything that had to do with the estate.
Being personal in terms of Eileen being angry that
Right.
this had happened? And after you found out that Carlos Menendez had made some arrangements with regard to the will, did you do anything with regard to the computer? With regard to the computer. Did you do anything?
Yes.
What did you do?
Well, once I found out that Carlos had hired his own expert, I wanted to know why, and I was suspicious, so I believe I called my brother first, and talked to him about it briefly just to see if he knew anything, and he said, basically just verified that Carlos had his own expert set up to come that Friday, and I think this was a Wednesday, and that Friday, and that Erik was going to be there and let him in the house.
Was that a surprise to you?
Well, at that point, I knew from Eileen that that's basically what I had heard, but I got the details, I think, from Erik, and certainly a surprise to me. The whole thing was a surprise to me, actually.
And what did you think about it?
I thought that Carlos was maybe, up to something, and was suspicious. I had known that my father didn't trust him, and I really didn't trust him. I didn't have anything against him, I just didn't know.
Jose didn't trust Carlos Peralt, so obviously the boys aren't going to trust him either. They're going to be suspicious of his intentions.
So,
What did you think he might do?
well, I thought he might create something on the computer that would. I wasn't sure what he was going to do, whether he was going to try and write a will that wrote himself in or cause problems in some way like that. I wasn't sure what his intentions were. But I figured if he hired his own person after Eileen went through all this trouble and went through my brother, which I thought was not proper, he should have gotten the executive's permission to go to the house to look through my mother's computer, or at least got both our permission, and he didn't do that. So I thought something might be going on.
So did you fly to California?
Yes.
And did you hire Mr. Whitkin?
Yes.
And did you do what the receipt indicates, which is to ask him to recover files on a hard drive?
Yes.
May I approach your honor?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 64. Do you recognize this?
I believe so. This is the receipt from Howard.
Yep. When he came to the house, did you let him in to look at the computer?
Yes.
And did you stay with him the whole time that he was pulling up whatever information was on the computer?
Not the whole time.
And did he tell you that there was anything in there? Did he tell you if there was anything in there?
He said that there was nothing in there. But just, there were computer-related things, but nothing that he could see that was personal or of any interest.
Did you ask him to erase whatever was on there?
I did. I asked him to erase it.
Did you ask him to erase it in a way that supposedly nobody could tell if it had been erased?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
I wanted him to erase it in a way that it would just look pretty much like nobody had been there at all, actually like nobody had been there at all if he could. And then when Carlos's expert came the next day, I would see what he was up to. And if he came back and said, there was this, I found this on the computer, a letter from your dad saying that I should get this, or what, I wasn't sure, but then I would know that it wasn't true. And he said he felt he could erase it in a way that nobody would find out. So I told him to do that.
And did you subsequently have a discussion with Carlos Menendez about this whole situation?
Yes.
And did you express to him what your concerns had been?
Yes, he was angry that I had done that, and I was angry that he had sort of gone behind Eileen's back and through my brother and not consulted Carlos and I, and was suspicious, and we had a discussion about it, and I think we understood each other.
Your Honor, the next section I have is only in front of the Lyle Menendez jury. It's fairly brief, so
Okay, you can do it by now?
I think I can.
All right, and at this point, what we'll do is have the blue jury take an early break for lunch and come back.
So Eric's jury is going to leave the room, and we're going to ask some questions in front of Lyle's jury only.
At 1:30, don't discuss this case with anyone, don't form any final opinion in court.
Back a half hour later, we would be able to cover both of the sections.
Okay. All right, then we'll change that and excuse you until 2 o'clock, and we'll see the blue jury back here at 2 o'clock.
Mr. Menendez, did you spend a lot of money before your parents died?
Yes.
Did you spend significantly more money after your parents died?
Yes.
And did you buy 3 Rolex watches
Yes.
and a Porsche?
Yes.
Did you spend a lot of money on clothes?
Yes.
Your parents were in the process of buying you a condominium at the time they died, is that correct?
Right.
Did you make an offer on another condominium that was right nearby?
Yes.
And why were you going to buy? Did you actually make offers on 2 other condominiums?
Yes.
And why were you going to buy those 2 other condominiums?
Well, actually, one was a condominium, and one was like a much larger place, like
Okay.
more like a patio home.
Okay.
And
What was your thought when you made the offer on the condominium?
well, I was going to go to Princeton, and the condominium that my parents bought was for that purpose, and we were really trying hard to get my brother into Princeton for that fall semester, and my Aunt Marta was arranging things, and everybody was trying to meet with the Princeton people, and I
Who
met
was
with,
that condominium going to be for?
that was for Erik.
And when you decided to make the offer on the patio home, who was going to live in that patio home?
Well, I wasn't sure if Erik was going to be able to get in, and it turned out that they wouldn't let him in for that semester. And in the event that he didn't get in, I wanted to make an offer on this patio home because then he was going to maybe play tennis then at that point and travel, and I wanted a place big enough for. I was going to be living in Princeton, and big enough for he and his coach, when they came into town, that they could stay in the house with me, rather than have these, maintain a separate condominium when he would be just flying in every once in a while.
Did you ever end up buying either one of those?
No.
And the one that did close was the one that your parents were in the process of buying when they died, is that
Right,
correct?
I finished the sale of that one.
And did you also borrow money from the estate to buy a restaurant?
Yes.
And when was that?
The restaurant was purchased at the end of January.
Why did you buy that? Or why did you invest in that?
Basically, I was just very unsure as to what was going on in my life at that point, whether I wanted to go back to school, since I wasn't able to start the first semester, whether I wanted to come in midterm, or whether I was going to go on the tour and play with Erik. And there was expectations of that, and I was sort of all over the place. And in talking with my uncles, basically this feeling that I should do something and focus on something, and I picked that.
Do you today have any of the watches?
No.
Do you have the Porsche?
No.
Do you own any condos?
No.
What happened to the restaurant?
Just gave it back to the person I bought it for.
After your parents died, you hired bodyguards.
So basically, what did they get out of it? Nothing. Nothing. There was no motive to spend all their money and do all this stuff, because that's not it. It wasn't. That was never the plan. They always had money. They were always provided for. So they were just used to spending money, I would argue. So I think they spent more because they didn't have Jose and Kitty controlling their money, but they were able to invest it in things like they wanted, like a kitchen or a restaurant, but um, they still were just accustomed to spending money, more so than any regular Joe Schmo like me and you, because they were loaded. He was a millionaire. They had the money.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Right.
Where was it that you first saw bodyguards after your parents died?
First saw bodyguards, the company hired them to guard the Beverly Hills house.
What did you think about that?
That they had that they knew about my dad's connections, or had more details as to my dad's connections, and had some concern that somebody might want to go back to the house to get something. So they were protecting the house pretty vigorously. I mean, the guards were armed and so on.
And did you hire bodyguards after that, after seeing the guards at the house, or before?
No, once I saw the series of things, once I saw the guards at the house, and from watching TV programs, I got nervous and just decided to hire some guards.
What about the TV programs that you watched made you nervous?
Well, there was just program after program about my dad's having Mafia connections, and that why this could be a Mafia hit. And I remember seeing it could have been a hard copy or one of those shows about this Mafia family and where my dad might have fit in, and the different things I knew about his business deals in the past that were shady, and just programs like that. And it just made me nervous. And then there was a release from the police, although detectives always said it was actually the coroner, but it seemed like the police releasing that it was a mob hit, and seemed like that's where the investigation would go.
But you knew the Mafia hadn't killed your parents,
Right.
right? So why did it frighten you that there was all this coverage about it being a mob hit?
Because nobody else knew that it wasn't the Mafia, and my concern was that whatever my dad's connections were, and I really didn't have as many details as people might have thought, that I was going to be helping the police and was furthering the investigation and giving up information. And I just felt that if my dad was doing something real illegal, or if he had some connection that was concerned about being exposed, they might think the sons were just giving it all up to find out who killed their parents. And I didn't want to give that impression. And I didn't want anything to happen to Erik and I because of that reason. So I hired the guards, at least in New Jersey.
How long did you have them?
About 2 weeks or so, just for a short period of time, to see if anything would happen.
Did you, during that period of time, believe that you were followed, Erik?
We were being followed.
How do you know you were being followed?
Because the limo, the bodyguard driver, told me that we were being followed. And
Did you believe him?
yes. And then I believe one of the main bodyguards checked up on it and said it may be the FBI following me. He had a friend in the FBI, and that it might be the FBI.
Could you think of any reason why the FBI would be following you?
No. I don't think he believed that too much either.
At some point, did you ask Glenn Stevens to help you out with regard to contacting the Mafia?
Yes.
Why did you ask Glenn Stevens to help you in that regard?
Because his family actually had Mafia connections, and
How did you know that?
because he bragged about it, and he actually did. They did actually have Mafia connections.
How do you know that?
Because we went up and met with one of the people who was supposedly in the mob and ran the security company in New York. Certainly looked like he was in the mob. And
Let me stop you. Did you talk to Glenn Stevens about your concerns about the Mafia?
yes,
And did he offer to set up a meeting for you?
yes,
And did he tell you something about who you would be meeting with?
yes.
And what did he tell you about the person you would be meeting with?
That he was a member of a crime family in New York, and that he would be a good person if I had concerns to talk to, since his father knew him very well.
And did you meet with this person?
Yes,
Do you remember his name?
yes.
What's his name?
His name was Tony Negri.
And where did this meeting take place?
At Anthony Negri's office in New York. And then we went out to a restaurant.
And did you tell him of your concerns?
Yes, I met with Glenn, and I went up there. I believe it was just Glenn and I. And at some point I asked to speak with him privately so I could discuss this with him. And I told him my concern, and that my brother and I were not interested in finding out who had killed my parents. And if he could maybe get the word out that we weren't helping in any police investigations, and if anybody was still nervous about that, whatever my dad was involved in, that we didn't want to know, and we had no concern for that. And
Did you tell him you had killed your parents?
no,
When you asked him to get the word out, I mean, did he tell you he would, or tell you he couldn't, or what did he tell you?
he told me that he would.
Did you feel
And-
better after that?
I felt better, and then we met again, and he told me that I had nothing to worry about.
Your Honor, if we could break at that point.
All right, we'll resume at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any direct examination of the defendant, Lyle Menendez.
Mr. Menendez, I believe you'd indicated that the first girlfriend you had was a young woman named Stacy Feldman, is that correct?
Right,
And after you broke up with Stacy, the next girlfriend you had was Jamie Pisarcik, is that correct?
right.
And when did you start going with Ms. Pisarcik?
At the end of the fall of '86.
And was she your girlfriend on and off for a period of time?
Yes,
And did you break up with her, or did she break up with you, rather, in February of 1989, the spring of 89?
in February of 1989.
89. And this-
She broke up with me in February of '89, and then, okay.
And did you resume the relationship shortly after your parents died?
Yes,
In fact, did she attend the memorial service?
Oh,
She-
crap. I just lost where we were. But I was going to say, take that, Mom and Dad. You won't let me see this girlfriend, and I'm going to bring her to your funeral. Or at least get back together with her after your funeral.
6.
And was she your girlfriend on and off for a period of time?
Yes,
And did you break up with her, or did she break up with you, rather, in February of 1989, the spring of 89?
In February of 1989.
89. And this,
She broke up with me in February of 89. And then, okay.
and did you resume the relationship shortly after your parents died?
Yes.
In fact, did she attend the memorial service in New Jersey?
Yes.
And was she your girlfriend at the time you were arrested?
No.
Did you resume the relationship with her after you were arrested?
It took a little while, but basically we became boyfriend and girlfriend again.
So while you were in jail, was she visiting you?
She visited me immediately, like the day after I got arrested.
And was she coming to visit you regularly?
Yes.
How often was she coming to visit you?
Probably about 4 times a week or more. I mean, pretty often.
And what is entailed in someone coming to visit you at the jail? Is that just easy? You make an appointment and you walk in, or is it difficult?
No, it's very difficult. And it's pretty oppressive, I think. So it's not an enjoyable experience for the most part. I mean, hopefully the visit is, but going and leaving is difficult.
And was she coming to court appearances for you? Was she coming to court when you went to court?
She was coming to court appearances, most of the ones she could. I mean, sometimes she was working.
Did she at some point begin to ask you about whether you had in fact killed your parents?
She never asked me until many months after I was arrested. She started to wonder, and she wanted to know, and then she started to really press me that she needed to know.
And did you decide to tell her?
Yes.
Was this in the fall of 90?
Yes.
Do you remember the exact date?
Not the exact date, but I believe it was in the fall.
And how is it that you told her?
I decided to write out, what had happened, and just essentially what had happened and why and some of the issues.
Why did you decide to tell her?
Because I didn't think it was fair with her coming down to the jail continually, and she had never asked me why, and this was obviously a very difficult thing to talk to her about, and I just felt like our relationship in the jail was getting to a point where it would be the right thing to do, and I was feeling very guilty, and she was pressing me to know, and I could have said, my attorneys have said not to talk to anybody, which they had, but with her being my girlfriend, I felt I should anyway.
So you said you wrote a letter?
Yes.
This guy, I mean, he's such a good guy, I feel. He's like, yeah, I should have told her. It was just the right thing to do. We were at that point in our relationship. Like, what? He's a good person. You can tell just by certain things that he says and does, and the sympathy and empathy that he has for other people. Even people like his mother who tells him that he's a mistake and he ruined the whole family. He still has empathy for her. So it's when I look at Lyle, I don't see a monster. I see a hero, like I said. I see someone who was standing up for his own rights and autonomy and safety, and his brothers as well. And that's what I see. But yet the world painted these guys as complete, horrific, lying monsters at the time in the media. And that shit has got to stop. Pardon my language. I don't like that we consider everybody guilty before even going to trial in this country. And the media has a huge role in that. And I don't like it. It needs to stop. It needs to change. We can't keep convicting people before they even have a chance to go in front of a jury.
A long letter or a short letter or what?
Several pages. Pretty long.
And in that letter, did you tell her that you had killed your parents?
Yes.
And in that letter, did you explain what had happened?
Yes.
And did you explain to her information about your background with your parents?
Yes.
Did you tell her that Erik had been molested by your father?
Yes.
Did you tell her that you had been molested by your mother?
Yes.
Did you tell her that you'd been molested by your father?
No.
Why?
I just couldn't tell her that.
Why?
It was just something I could talk to her about my mom, but there were lots of reasons, but mostly because I was just ashamed, and I hadn't really decided. In fact, I had sort of in my own mind.
Let me go back. Why were you ashamed?
I don't know why. I just felt like that was not something. I mean, I knew that Erik had talked to people about it, but I wasn't going to say what happened to me. And
Why not?
I just... I don't know, it wasn't really, I mean, it was embarrassing, but it was really more than that. I just didn't want to say that my dad did those things. I didn't want to say the things he did to me. And
Why? Why didn't you want to say what
He didn't want to admit it because admitting it makes it real, makes it true.
your dad had done to you?
Because I was ashamed.
Were you concerned about your father?
I just didn't think that I could go through that. One problem was I felt, see, this was Jamie. I mean, there were two problems. One was Jamie herself being my girlfriend, and I really felt concerned that she would feel differently about me and it would affect our relationship if I revealed this to her. And, you know, talking about what happened with my mother was just not the same. I didn't think she would see it the same. And, but really, at that point in time, there was a whole other issue of whether I would talk about this to anybody. And if I was asked to here, and I never wanted to have to do what I did here. And
I mean, he even finds the word, or he struggles finding the words to talk about what his dad did to him. He can't or won't process it. He doesn't want to acknowledge it because the more you talk about it, the more you re-experience it, the more you process it in your mind, the more you deal with that issue. Well, he is choosing not to deal with it. He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to think about that stuff. Obviously, it's painful to talk about. And his dad, he was always, the apple of his dad's eye. So it makes it even worse. Plus, the stigma of male on male abuse is this is the 90s we're talking about. People were definitely very unawoke back then, especially when it came to these kinds of topics.
it's been very depressing to have to do that. And I've felt drained since I've done it, and I felt like I betrayed my dad to some extent.
That's the other part of the guilt. You have been told your whole life, don't tell anybody about this and don't shame the family name and all that. And here he is, smearing the family name by telling the truth and talking about it. So that's why he doesn't want to.
There were a lot of things going on in my mind. I had a good relationship with my grandmother, and I didn't want her to hear those things from
Your
me.
grandmother, you mean your father's mother?
Right.
You said you felt like you betrayed your father. Why is it a betrayal of your father?
It just feels that way. I don't know why.
Do you want people to think well of your father?
I would have liked that.
Why, after all he did to you, do you want people to think well of your father?
I just missed the connection I had with him, and I loved him, and I felt, I guess, very guilty. And seeing my grandmother and people hurt.
Do you feel like you've betrayed him now by the things you've told about him here in court?
I have.
How
I
do you
have
feel?
betrayed him.
How do you feel about having betrayed him?
Just depressed. And wishing that, I don't know, sorry.
This is real raw emotion, guys. I know I've said this before. You can't fake this. This is not just some bogus fake answers just to get sympathy or to get out of a conviction. I really believe that what Lyle is telling is the truth.
So in the letter, you didn't tell her about your father, is that right?
No.
Did you tell her about the fear?
Yes.
What did she say about the fear and the fight before? Did you tell her about that?
Yes, I wrote everything.
What did she say about that?
What did who say about it?
What did Jamie say about the fear and the fight?
Well, we didn't get that far.
do you
Because
mean?
as soon as she read, at some point, she just got very angry. Basically about what I was saying happened to my brother. She didn't believe it. She didn't, I don't know if she was angry about just hearing that I was involved. And she was, I was crying, and she was very upset, and I believe crying. And, she was sad, but she was angry. She didn't want to believe that. She didn't want to believe those things. She hadn't seen it herself, she said. And we basically, she didn't want to read anymore.
Did you have another conversation with her?
Yes.
I'd like to play a tape at this point in time.
Is this tape an exhibit?
Yes, we mark it as the next in order.
247,
And we have transcripts also, could we mark those as
248.
Your Honor, I believe with the stipulation, this is the voice of Jamie Pisarcik?
Yes, and also there was stipulation that the court was not transcribe this.
That's correct.
I did not hear what the prosecution said, but they are stipulating that this is the voice of Jamie, the girlfriend or ex-girlfriend of Lyle.
Previous to, or prior to him telling me that he was holding the letter up, I guess he was kind of, working on his own defense type thing. And he had asked me to watch a movie called At Close Range. And that is what, in that movie there was a scene where that is what they wanted me to say. He and his lawyer, which was Joel at the time. This is what Lyle was saying. I've never spoken to Joel.
You talking about Joel?
Joel. Had wanted me to say happened to me.
Now what happened to At Close Range?
I had seen the movie before. I did not go home and watch it. I hadn't seen it. But in that movie, the father, I guess, makes passes, or I don't believe he raped the one character, Sean Penn's girlfriend. He had asked me to say that that's what had happened. And it was...
Lyle asked you?
Yeah.
Say that to him.
So Jose had made a pass that you did in the movie?
Yeah.
And you're going to say something about that?
And that there was going to be a large sum of money placed in my bank account.
Who told you that?
Lyle said that.
It wasn't a threat, it was a bribe.
It was a wrong, I guess. And that I just said, this is one of the things that started me wondering about the whole thing. But I just said if that ever happened, I'd go right to the police. And nothing was ever said after that. Nothing, there was no money put in my bank account. He said, that's what I thought you'd say, and that's what I told Joel you'd say. He would never do that.
Did you get the idea that his attorney had helped him fill out this defense? Or did you ever talk to him?
No.
Okay,
He never told me.
no.
So I don't know if you don't know if this is coming straight from Lyle. Or not.
So what he wanted you to say was not the truth. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, this effort to blame Mr. Ray would never say anything like that towards me.
Was this at the same time that he had held up another
No, this is previous.
previous to that?
Yeah. 7 weeks or so.
But you just indicated that was sort of what started you thinking that you wanted
Questioning.
Okay.
Was there any other requests made like that from that point until the point that he held up the
No, that was it. And he knew how I felt about it. And that was it.
Now,
It was really hard to hear. I think she was talking about Lyle wanting to watch a movie with Sean Penn, something about that, and how there was some kind of uh, essay going on. And so he was saying to tell her that that's what happened to her or something. That's what I heard, but I don't know if I'm correct in that. But that's what she said, or that's what I think I heard.
Menendez, is that essentially the way the conversation went?
Yes.
Your Honor, the remainder of the materials in front of both juries. Oh, give the instruction. Yes, please.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are instructed that the reference just made to a lawyer named Joel does not refer to any lawyer now representing Lyle Menendez, and you are not to infer therefrom any impropriety by present counsel for either Lyle or Erik Menendez. All right? And are you now ready to have the other jury come in as well?
I am, Your Honor.
Okay, do we have everybody here?
Receive a telephone call from Dr. Oziel.
Yes.
Where were you?
It's in the house in Beverly Hills.
And what did Dr. Oziel say to you? I'm sorry. Excuse me, I have to relocate. Okay. What did Dr. Oziel say to you?
He said that he had my brother in his office, and that my brother had told him everything.
What did you say?
I believe I asked him what he meant by that, and he just said he didn't want to talk about it on the phone, and I should come over.
Did you go over?
Yeah, he sounded very nervous and tense, and so I had a good feeling of what exactly they had talked about, so I definitely went over.
What did you think they had talked about?
I figured my brother had told him that what happened on Sunday, and I wasn't sure exactly what, but something to that effect, certainly that we were involved, and that they might have talked about turning ourselves into the police or something to that effect.
So you drove over there? Is that correct?
I drove over, yeah.
How long did it take you to get there?
Just a couple minutes.
And how were you feeling when you walked into the office?
Nervous and afraid that my brother may have decided that we should turn ourselves into the police, and that Oziel, who I knew from previous occasions, had this information.
Did you trust Dr. Oziel?
No.
Were you upset with your brother?
Yes, I was very upset.
So from before you even walked into the office, did you think you knew what had happened?
I was not sure what had happened, and I didn't want to know what had happened until I heard what it was that they wanted to do.
What happened when you walked in the office?
I walked in and I sat down, and in the chair closest to his desk. And
How did he seem? How did Dr. Oziel
he
seem?
seemed very nervous.
How did your brother seem?
He seemed even worse, even more nervous. And just agitated and, I guess wondering what I was going to think. So I sat down and Oziel wanted to tell me what had been said.
What did you say?
I told him that I didn't want to hear whatever my brother had told him.
Why?
Because I wanted to talk to Erik first. And I didn't know if they were, basically because I didn't know if he was going to go to the police or what they had decided together that they had now called me and wanted me to agree to turn myself in. And I just felt that talking to Dr. Oziel at that point wasn't a good idea. I didn't want to do that.
So what did you do?
I just stayed. I didn't want to leave either. My brother was involved at this point, and I just basically wanted to hear what Dr. Oziel had to say.
Did you say anything to your brother?
At some point, my brother and I got into an argument, and I started shouting at my brother, basically. And
What were you saying to him?
I was upset that I was having this conversation with Oziel, and at some point I expressed that I felt like my brother had in some way trusted Dr. Oziel more than me, and why did he go to Dr. Oziel and not me first? Because Dr. Oziel had said that Erik was suicidal and had been having a lot of emotional problems and might commit suicide, and that's why he came to him. And I felt like he should have come to me, and I felt hurt to a large degree and sort of betrayed by the fact that they had sort of gotten together and talked about things, and I had not had a discussion with my brother like this, really. We had not been able to talk about it. And so in saying that to Dr. Oziel, my brother got very, I don't know if upset's the right word, but he was, in saying those things and not wanting to talk about what he had talked to Dr. Oziel about, he was feeling, I guess you could use the word upset. It wasn't that he was angry, but he was just very unhappy about that.
Were you angry?
I was angry.
Were you angry with your brother?
I was angry with him.
Were you frightened?
Of the situation, yes.
Were you emotional?
It was a very intense meeting with me yelling at my brother, Oziel telling me that I seemed menacing to him, and me sort of feeling cornered, partly my own fault because I didn't want to go and talk to them about what they wanted to talk about, yet I really couldn't leave.
Why didn't you want to talk about what they wanted? First of all, what did they want to talk about?
Well, just initially when I came in, Dr. Oziel wanted to tell me everything that he and Dr. Oziel, my brother and Dr. Oziel had discussed, and I didn't want to hear it, and until I heard it from my brother first. And essentially, I just wanted to leave with my brother.
Did Dr. Oziel say anything to you about confidentiality?
Yes.
What did he say?
Well, he said that I seemed menacing to him and that there was potential confidentiality, but that if somebody threatened him or if he felt threatened, that there would not be confidentiality and he could just go to the police and with the information he had. And actually, I believe he said that he would be obligated to go, but I'm not positive. But he said that if he felt threatened, it wouldn't be confidential, but that there was supposed to be confidentiality, and if he wasn't threatened, then this would be confidential, and he couldn't go to the police even if he wanted to. And this long discussion about narrative, more like about that.
Did you want him to go to the police?
No, I told him that that's exactly what I was afraid he was going to do.
Did you want him to feel threatened?
No, I wanted him to feel the opposite.
Why?
Because of what he just told me.
So who's doing the threatening here? It seems like Dr. Oziel is threatening Erik. Wow.
During the time that you were yelling at your brother and expressing how you felt about him having told this secret, how was your brother reacting?
He was crying and he was sort of becoming hysterical, and at some point ran out of the room.
And what did you do when he ran out of the room?
I went to follow him.
What did Dr. Oziel do?
He wanted me to stay.
Why did he want you to stay?
Well, at some point he told me he wanted me to either there or in the hallway. I confused the area sometimes, but that he didn't feel comfortable with me leaving and the session ending that way with Erik hysterical. And he told me that he felt threatened by my demeanor and I had seemed menacing to him, and that he just felt very uncomfortable and wanted me to stay at least since my brother was clearly not going to stay. And I told him that I needed to take care of my brother, and I wanted to just talk to my brother first, and then we could come back.
Were you very firm about that, about wanting to take care of your brother?
Yes, and it was clear that that's what I was going to do. I was like leaving, and we were kind of like, he was kind of like following me. And again, I'm not sure if he followed us all the way outside, so this could have happened right outside or upstairs. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that I said goodbye to him in the hallway, like by where the elevators are. But I believe then he followed me anyway, downstairs, still saying that he felt uncomfortable and wanted me to go back upstairs with him, and me telling him no, and then we arranged that we would meet again.
Where did you go when you got downstairs?
We went, my brother was leaving. He got in his Jeep to leave. And I was trying to get my brother to relax, and while trying to get Oziel sort of to relax at the same time, and just tell him we'd come back, and I just didn't want to deal with Dr. Oziel. I wanted to talk to my brother, and he was sort of hysterical and ready to drive away. So at some point Oziel said okay, and I quickly just sort of, I believe he said we'd see him whenever the date was, November 2nd or something, but I'm not positive. He may have said, I'll call you or something like that. But we arranged to meet again. I agreed I would with Erik, and he went back upstairs.
Dr. Oziel went back upstairs? Is that yes?
Yes.
What condition was your brother in at that point?
He was crying, pretty frantic, upset with me.
Why was he upset with you?
For saying that that going to Dr. Oziel had been sort of a betrayal of our trust, and that I believe I said something upstairs about how much could he love me if he trusts Dr. Oziel more than his own brother when he's suicidal and so on. And so it was pretty intense for him, and I think he was upset, and I should not have said the things I said.
When you got to the Jeep, did you continue telling him that you thought that he was disloyal, or what were you
We didn't talk at the Jeep, really. He wanted to leave, and so he left, and I told him I'd talk to him at the house.
Did you go back to the house?
Yes.
And when you got back to the house, did you talk about what happened?
Yes.
And did he tell you what had happened?
I asked him once he had calmed down, and just don't remember the conversation completely, but basically just asked him what he had said. At that point, I wanted to know what he had told Dr. Oziel, and he said that he had told him that we did it, and that nobody, I believe he said that nobody else knew that he had said this to Dr. Oziel, and that he was feeling very depressed and very suicidal, and that he couldn't come to me, that I was sort of unstable and changing my mind as to whether I wanted to play tennis or go to school or business, and that
let me ask you, did he give you the details of what he said to Dr. Oziel?
No, and I believe he said he did not give him, that he said he did not, he told him he didn't know why it happened.
Did you talk about going back to Dr. Oziel? Did you talk with your brother about going back to Dr. Oziel?
Well, we talked about whether we should go back or not.
And was a decision made as to whether you would go back?
Yes, we decided that we should definitely go back.
And why did you decide to go back?
Well, it was either never talk to him again and not go back and not have any more contact with him, or go back. And since he had felt threatened by me and he had said this thing about confidentiality, I was very concerned that he was going to go to the police, especially if we didn't go back and just not return his calls or whatever. So my brother and I decided that it was definitely better to go back and try to just get him to relax and express to him that there was no problem, and basically see what Oziel wanted to do and feel him out and just sort of go with the flow and try to get him. The main thing was to just get him to relax so that he didn't run to the police. And so
did you make some decisions yourself about what you were going to talk to him about?
Yes.
And what decisions did you make about what you were going to talk to him about?
What decisions did I make myself?
Yes.
Well, Erik had not talked to him about what had happened with Dad, and I certainly wasn't going to talk about it. And I felt that we shouldn't talk about it. That I just didn't want to, and I was glad that he didn't, and that we shouldn't. And I actually didn't feel we should talk about anything, as little as possible, partly in case he did go to the police, but mostly just just didn't want to talk to him about it. And Erik had said to him that he didn't know why, and that Oziel seemed to think he could figure out why, and just go back and, from what I knew of Oziel, I figured he would do a good job figuring it out, and we would talk about, he knew about my relationship between my parents somewhat, my family a little bit, and we would talk about that. And assuming that things were going well, we could just sort of continue to see him.
Were you going to talk about the facts of the killings themselves?
No, because then we would have to talk about why, and we didn't want to do that, and so we just weren't going to volunteer it at this point since Erik had.
Did you go back to him then on November the 2nd?
Yes.
And Dr. Oziel said that he had told you both that he could be helpful to you in terms of describing the family constellation. That's what he's testified to here. Did he say something like that to you?
I think that's exactly what he said.
And what did that mean to you in describing the family constellation?
Just talking about the emotions involved in the family, the personality of my dad, my mom, the interaction in the family, and the emotions that could conceivably have led to something like this, and maybe figure out why this happened.
Were you willing to talk about those things with him?
Yes.
Now, when you went in on November the 2nd, can you describe for us how the session was conducted?
Basically, like a regular therapy session, sitting down, and him in his chair, and basically we talked about the family, like he said, the family constellation, and he would give his impressions from what he knew already and what he felt could have been going on that might lead to something like this, and he would sort of tell you, you would give some responses, and he would kind of tell you how he felt that you feel, and what you were feeling, and what you might have been feeling at.
That's not what a therapist is supposed to do. They're supposed to let you explain how you feel, not put feelings and words in your own mouth.
Before, and that could have led to this, and basically just talk about like the family dynamic, as he put it, and
Were you volunteering a lot of information?
no, we were not volunteering information, very little.
So you said that Dr. Oziel would tell you what he thought you were thinking at the time, that type of thing?
Yeah, he talked a lot, and he just, he rambled on about what it was he felt was going on, and basically knew a lot more about my dad. My mom's a very secretive person. He didn't have a good understanding of that, and I didn't want to talk about it, but essentially, basically the only thing that was discussed about her was that she was depressed, which she knew at some point in her life, and might even have been suicidal, and we may have told him that. And
let me ask you, when he would give you these theories about what you were thinking or how you were feeling, was he right some of the times?
Yes.
Was he wrong some of the times?
Sometimes he was pretty far off base, but
would you tell him when he was right? Would you say, yeah, that's the way we felt, or you were right about that?
sometimes if he asked us, we would tell him almost always yes.
What about
a lot of times he didn't. He believed that we didn't really know exactly how we felt.
How do you know he believed that?
Well, partly because we were telling him we didn't know why this had happened, and so he was he accepted that as, that we sort of like, of course you don't know why, and there's just all these things going on in your family and the way you were brought up and in your mind, and just felt that he could piece it together through figuring out what was going on between everybody, and my mom's depression, my dad's controlling nature, and maybe he suggested that down the road we might be able to figure this out, get it out through hypnosis or get it out through some way. So a lot of times he didn't think we knew exactly how we felt.
So did you agree with him generally, with whatever conclusions he came up with about your family? Or would you tell him it's wrong?
No, I would basically agree. He would say it in a way that you just agreed, and he had a pretty good understanding of some of the issues. And so we stayed pretty much among those issues.
Were you eager to tell him a lot of things about your family?
Well, we knew what we didn't want to talk about, and I basically didn't want to tell him anything about my family if I could help it. I didn't want to be there. But part of the problem was, at least for me, was my brother was suicidal and depressed. And Oziel would say some things that made Erik feel better, like when he said that my mom was so depressed she would have wanted to be killed, and we'd probably done her a favor, he said. And
What therapist says that? Wow. Okay. Go, Dr. Oziel.
we were both very depressed about my mom's death, and that made Erik feel better. And so those were things where he was not really correct, insofar that I don't think my mom was depressed to that point and suicidal when she died, but it made Erik feel better, so I just sort of agreed. So there were things like that he would say.
Dr. Oziel said that he told you that he had put tapes in safety deposit boxes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did he tell you about having done that before for other patients or with other patients, that he'd put tapes in safety deposit boxes?
Yes.
What did he tell you in that regard?
For the hitman. He said he treated a hitman, and with certain situations, basically, I guess, that involved knowing about people that had died, he would take certain precautions. That was basically taping notes of his dictation and putting them in safe deposit boxes, and that's.
He's talking about cassette tapes, FYI. So, like, recordings, the things that they've been playing in this trial because it's so old. I think you young folks wouldn't know what a cassette tape is, but that's what he's talking about.
That's what he said he did with us.
And did you believe that he had done that?
Yes.
I don't.
Dr. Oziel said that when you came in on November the 2nd, that you said that you and Erik had sat in the Jeep laughing and talking about killing him, that you told him that you and Erik had this conversation in the Jeep.
Right.
You remember him testifying to that?
Yes.
Was that true? Had you and your brother sat in the Jeep and talked about
No.
killing Dr. Oziel?
No, we didn't, but we did discuss that because he felt that he said that.
Let me stop you. First, did you have the discussion in the Jeep?
No, we never had any discussion in the Jeep.
Was your brother in a joking mood in the Jeep after
No, he
the
was.
October 31st
He
session?
ran out of the room, ran down. He was hysterical. He was trying to get the Jeep started, and he wouldn't wait around to talk. I just told him we'd talk at home, and he took off.
Did this conversation come up with Dr. Oziel on November 2nd? Was there some conversation about you and your brother sitting in the Jeep and plotting his murder?
Yes. He said that in talking about how, basically at the beginning of the session when he was saying that he was not happy with the way that the last session ended, that he had felt threatened by, basically by me, my behavior and the way I was looking at him and so on. That he had this image after it was over that we were in the Jeep, sitting down in the Jeep plotting to kill him. And I told him we hadn't had any discussion in the Jeep and that was ridiculous and that we weren't doing that. And he was basically joking, but he also seemed concerned.
Did he still seem nervous?
Yes.
Was that of some concern to you? That he was nervous?
Great concern to me.
Why?
Because we were there. That's basically why we were there, because we knew he was concerned and we didn't want him to go to the police. And he was saying that he could do that since he had felt threatened.
But Oziel was threatening them to go to the police if they didn't come in and let him record their conversations. How sick and twisted is that? That's crazy that a shrink is doing that. Sorry for whatever, calling them a shrink. I don't know. But yeah, that's crazy. That Oziel is the one threatening them, but saying that he feels threatened. Okay, buddy. Okay.
And when he told you about, wondering if you were sitting in the Jeep plotting to kill him, he said that you said something like it wouldn't look too good if he disappeared. Remember him testifying to that?
Yes, I remember that.
Did you say that?
No.
He testified that there was a discussion in which there was a discussion about whether somebody was willing to live in fear. And Dr. Oziel said that he wasn't willing to live in fear, and he said that you said, neither did my father. And was there any discussion about living in fear with Dr. Oziel? Do you remember any discussion of that nature?
Yes.
And what was that discussion, as you remember it?
That was in talking about my dad's personality and the fact, and I was expressing that my dad was a fearless person, and that there had been times when he had intense negotiations with essentially gangster-connected people like Barry Gordy and so on, that he wasn't afraid by any of the threats that he would get from time to time, that he didn't choose to live his life in fear. And that's something that I often said to people, that my dad never chose to live in fear and that he was essentially fearless. And I think I told that to Detective Zolik, no?
Did Dr. Oziel tell you that he was going to try to work with you to try to resolve whatever issues you had emotionally that had led you to commit the crimes? Do you remember him saying something like that?
Yes.
And was that what the purpose of all of this was, of meeting with him?
Yes.
From his perspective?
Yes.
I'll restate the question, please.
Is that what he indicated?
Yes.
His perspective was?
Right.
And did you tell him that you were in agreement with that?
That I was in agreement with what?
With the idea of trying to figure out what had caused you to commit the crimes. Did you tell him that you were there to work on that with him?
Yes.
Dr. Oziel said that they had a conversation, that he had a conversation with you and your brother with regard to hating your father and why you had to kill him. Do you remember him testifying to that?
Hating my father and why I had to kill him?
Dr. Oziel testified that you and your brother said that you'd hated your father and told him why you had to kill him. Do you remember having a discussion with regard to hating your father?
I believe that I said that I hated him for dying, and that there were times that I hated him for some of the things he did to my mom.
What did you mean you hated your father for dying?
Well, for a long period of time I was, it sounds bad, but I felt like it was my dad's fault that this had happened, and that my life was sort of a shambles because of it, and that, you know, my brother was sort of lost and depressed and suicidal, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and just incredible pain and guilt, and blame my dad essentially
Did you
for
know?
letting it get to that point, and so I was angry with him. I don't know how to better describe it. That's basically what I was feeling.
Did you know that was irrational when you felt that way? Or did you believe when you had these feelings? I mean, at some level, did you know that didn't make any sense?
I knew that, yes, because obviously I'd killed him, but I'm not sure that it, none of it made a lot of sense to me, but that's definitely what I was feeling, and I don't know how else to describe it.
Did you think your life was better or worse after your parents died?
It was much worse to me. I was depressed on and off, and feeling lost all the way up to the moment I got arrested. It was incredibly different. I felt very lost, and really from the moment the police left the house. You know, they didn't leave any instructions as to what we should do, and we didn't know until relatives started arriving immediately and taking over. So I had no idea what to do. Didn't know how to pay bills, didn't know anything, and just kind of feeling like this incredible pressure and all the fear and everything that was going on, and then suddenly it was over. My parents were taken away, and it was just my brother and I. And we never got our act together in any way up until the time we got arrested. And it wasn't too long after that the thing with Oziel started, and that was a lot of stress, pressure, and I was sort of being pulled in so many different directions. You wish you could go back to just being at the condo and at school and everything the same as it was, although it had not been great. It had been better than it had ever been for me, at least in my life. On the other hand, my brother's situation was not tolerable, and his life was a wreck. So for him, maybe it was better, although it certainly didn't seem like it.
You say it didn't seem like it, you mean because of how he acted?
Yes.
How did he act? After you
I do want to point out, though, that both of the boys have admitted that being in prison is better than being in that household. So, after, years of being away from it and everything, they consider prison an upgrade from what they were living.
your parents died, how did your brother act?
Suicidal, depressed, crying on and off.
Dr. Oziel testified that you and your brother told him that you felt you had to kill your father because he was constantly ridiculing you, putting you down, controlling your every activity, controlling you in every way, that he made you to feel not adequate, that he made you feel inferior, that he dominated him, that you knew you couldn't please him. Do you remember him testifying to all those things?
Yes.
And were those things discussed with Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And did you volunteer that information, or did your brother, or where did it come from?
We all talked about it, but those were things that Oziel felt he knew well and could talk about at length and did. And essentially, I agreed with him that those things, my dad had those characteristics, and the relationship was often like that, although really not at the end. But he certainly had those characteristics.
Dr. Oziel testified that you said you wanted to write a book about your father, you and your brother.
Yes.
Did that conversation take place?
Yes.
Did you tell him? Did you and your brother tell him you wanted to write a book about him?
Yes.
And did you want to?
Yes.
Why?
My brother and I talked about the fact that my dad was, and we were trying, the family was completely focused on the good things I remembered about my parents, especially my dad, with the success and the sort of rags to riches story. And there was a lot of pain and feeling from my grandmother there, and I was getting the sense in the community that this was sort of a loss for the Cuban community, that he would have gone on to be senator and this greatness. And my brother and I talked about making a book that would be about all the great things he had achieved, and that everybody.
So it's a book honoring him, not uncovering all of the secrets of the family. That's interesting. Because if I were to write a book, if I was someone who had been abused and I was to write a book about my abuser, I would talk about my experiences and how I survived it, not about how great a person that abuser is. But apparently, they still hold Jose in really high regard and want to share the family legacy out for the world to read, apparently.
Everybody would appreciate that, and I thought that would be a great idea, so I wanted to do that.
Why did you want to write a book praising your dad after the things he had done to you?
So just for those reasons I said, I just admired his success, and I felt like there were a lot of people in the whole Cuban community in Miami and so on that were admiring the sort of myth of my father, and just wanting to preserve that.
The myth of my father. So all the people that know of Jose and praise Jose, it's a myth. It's all a myth. But he wanted to preserve that myth for his father.
And my own feeling of the guilt, which just seemed to grow with myself and I think with Erik as relatives continued to talk about how great my dad was. And also, some of them had a very big misconception as to the family and the image of the family and the relationship between my mom and dad. And I remember my Uncle Brian talking about it was like a storybook romance and how great the relationship was, and which of course wasn't true. And so those things were making me feel guilty. So
Did you tell people when they talked about what a great relationship your parents had? Did you tell them about the affairs and what your mom's condition had been like?
No. I mean, occasionally I would say a few things so they'd get a little better perspective, like Carlos Menendez in that talk I had with him at the Hyatt about the computer. I mentioned to him that my dad had affairs and the marriage was really not so good. And the sense I got was that he hadn't really known that.
So even the other family members didn't know about everything that was going on in the house. It was all secrets. Secrets and more secrets going on in the Menendez house.
You told us that there had been this discussion by Dr. Oziel that your mother was suicidal and that what you had done was really putting her out of her misery. Remember Dr. Oziel testifying about that?
Well, I believe he said that we had done her a favor.
Was that what you said or Erik said, or is that what Dr. Oziel said?
No, that's what he said. I never said that, and but it did make Erik feel better, and so I agreed. And I guess there might have been some further discussion that putting her out of her misery or something like that. I don't. It's possible.
Dr. Oziel also testified that you said that the reason that she was killed is because she was a witness, and you couldn't think of any way to kill your father without killing her. You remember him testifying to that?
Yes.
Did either you or your brother ever say that?
No. We didn't say that, and that doesn't make any sense.
Why doesn't it make any sense?
Well, just that they would, if my father had been, just the statement that there would be no way to kill my father without killing my mother really doesn't make any sense, because my dad traveled constantly, and I was with him alone in New Jersey all the time, and alone with him many different places on the way to tennis practices and different things. And that whole thing that Oziel was talking about does not make any sense to me.
Dr. Oziel.
You know what? I'm going to pause it right here. I'm going to take care of the dogs. I will be right back. And we're back. And back to Dr. Oziel, the conversation between Lyle, Erik, and Oziel. So,
Oziel said that you had told him that you had this perfect plan that you couldn't deviate from. Do you remember him testifying to that?
Yes.
Did you tell him you had this perfect plan?
No.
Did you have a plan?
No. And we never discussed with Oziel anything surrounding what happened or what happened as far as the details of it or any of that. And in fact, the only thing we discussed was some of the aftermath and just sort of how completely chaotic it was and how we had expected to get caught and go to jail, or the police would arrest us, and that had not happened. And him sort of agreeing.
So when you saw him on October 31st and then you were there with your brother on November 2nd, you didn't discuss any details of how your parents had actually died. Is that correct?
No.
This was all of the session directed at figuring out the reasons why it had happened rather than how it had happened?
Right. He was trying to figure out, he was sort of fishing for and trying to figure out the reasons why, since my brother had told him he didn't know why, and I was not helping and saying I didn't know why either. And he felt that he could figure it out, and basically that's what we were talking about. And I didn't feel that I could, if we got anywhere near the details, we would have to tell him why and the issues, and we weren't going to do that. So we just stayed away from it completely. And I just told him I didn't want to talk about it whenever he would bring it up, and so he really wouldn't bring it up to. Occasionally he would want to get a better sense. Maybe he could figure out why, and I would say that it made me very sad, and that I did not want to talk about what happened, and he accepted that.
Dr. Oziel testified that Erik said that he had noticed that your mother was getting very nervous and agitated shortly before she died and began locking doors. And do you remember any sort of discussion about what your mother's condition was right before they died?
I don't remember that.
Do you remember talking about what her behavior was during that period of time? Or do you remember?
I don't. Not when I was there. I don't remember that. He talked about her emotional state through that period and what she was feeling, but not specific to that weekend, because we never talked about what was going on that weekend.
Now, Dr. Oziel, could we perhaps take a break at this point? I'm going to start another section, so
Well, how much longer do you have?
I probably have another half hour to 45
Let's
minutes.
see if we can continue.
You indicated that. One strike there. Dr. Oziel testified that you made a comment to him which said, you said that your father had said, "You can kill me if you want to, but you won't get any money if you do," or words to that effect. That was Dr. Oziel's testimony. Do you remember telling Dr. Oziel anything about your dad and money? And whether you would get
Well,
it?
I told him I was out of the will, but I never told him that that conversation had happened, and there's no way that anybody that knows my dad would know that could never have happened, that somebody would threaten my dad. I would be in the hospital if I intimated to my father that I was going to kill him or hurt him. That could not have happened.
Okay,
And
so
the meek response that he would just say, "You're not going to get any money," is Oziel just didn't really know that side of my father, and I did not say that, and I would never have said that.
And your dad wouldn't say something like, "You can kill me if you want to"?
That could never happen. Nobody would have said that to my dad, and he certainly would never have had that response.
Did you have any discussion with Dr. Oziel about what would happen if you had children and what they might do to you? Dr. Oziel testified that there was a discussion about what might happen to you and your brother if you had children, and that the two of you and your brother, expressed some fear that your children might end up killing you. Do you remember any discussion about that?
Yes.
And what was that discussion?
He was explaining to us that people tend to do to their children what their parents did to them, and how that.
I think that's a big clue as to what happened to Jose when he was a kid. Big clue right there. Big clue.
Sort of goes from generation to generation, and how that relates, and just expressing to us that we might control our children, and the same sort of dynamic might come up in our own families later on when we had families, and might rise to our children killing us.
Now, is that a topic that you brought up or Dr. Oziel brought up?
He was explaining, he brought it up. He was explaining to us that this is the phenomenon, or.
Oh, okay. Oziel said that. I thought Jose said that it goes from father to son. No, sorry. I take that back. That was Oziel saying that to them, which it's not wrong that, there's a cycle and it goes from generation to generation. I thought Jose was saying that to him, to Lyle, but I correct myself. That was Oziel.
That it goes from generation to generation, and how that could happen.
Dr. Oziel said that you told him that you were very sad about having killed your mother, and you didn't even like to think about the fact that you'd killed your mother.
Right.
Did you say something like that to him?
Yes, that's what I told him.
And Dr. Oziel testified that you said you didn't have any real maternal feelings toward her, and you didn't really respond to her as being a mother figure. Is that correct?
That's right.
And he said that you told him that You saw her as a pitiful person, somebody who was completely dominated by the father, and that she had a lot of potential. Did you tell him that?
Not in those words, but I talked about the fact that she was very unhappy with the marriage and had been, and was at times dominated, but was an extremely powerful and capable woman herself.
Did you tell him that she was very bright and there were all sorts of things that maybe she could have been?
Yes.
She was never able to do those things?
Right. And those are the things she had told me, so I told him that that's what she had said.
And he testified here that you acknowledged that you fired the shot that actually killed your mother in the end. Did you tell him that?
I did.
Is that because you believe you fired the last shot to your mother?
Right.
Do you know if she would have lived or not if you hadn't fired that shot?
My brother and I felt that she wouldn't have lived regardless. That
Is that from what you heard here in court, or is that what you knew the night you fired the shot? The night you fired the shot, did you know what condition she was in?
no, but we talked about it afterwards, and we felt.
Dr. Oziel said that that he had talked to you about whether the two of you had killed your parents for the money. Did you talk to him about that?
Could you say that again?
Yes. Dr. Oziel testified that you discussed with him whether you killed your parents for the money or not.
That we discussed with him whether we had done for the money or not?
Yes. Was there any discussion of that nature?
Yes, I told him that we were out of the will, and he seemed very involved with the financial aspect, with the estate and everything, and
Yeah, because Oziel saw dollar signs when he saw you guys. That's all it was to him. He didn't care about treating them. He was so self-absorbed, and he was the one saying, like, I can solve this. I can figure out why this happened. Mean, egomaniac. He was an egomaniac. And for him to, and he was totally after their money. He charged them for the funeral. For attending the funeral, he charged the boys. And I'm talking like full hours, full days worth of therapy that just because he was present, it's ridiculous. This guy he sees dollar signs when he sees the boys. That's my opinion, and prove me wrong.
was one moment when he tried to say that, I basically asked if that had something to do with it, and I told him that,
And when you
that I
say-
knew.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just about that part, I knew that it had not been for money.
You said that he showed some interest in the estate, in the financial matters. Is that correct?
Yes.
When had he first shown some interest in the financial aspect of the situation?
From the very beginning, when he came over shortly after my parents died at the hotel.
Did he spend a great deal of time at the hotel and around you right after your parents died?
Yes.
And what was he doing during that time?
Giving advice.
What kind of advice?
Well, just saying that he was there. When he was saying he was there if we needed him, we wanted to come to him for therapy, which we did not. But he was helping us find a lawyer that could handle the probate and giving us suggestions. And I guess he seemed to say he was a big businessman and knew lots of different lawyers, and he could help us with regards to that. And I believe that he did give us some suggestions.
Did he seem to be interested in how much money you were going to get?
I don't know at that time if he asked. We did have some discussions as to the problems with the estate, and that it would be very complicated since my dad basically didn't pay taxes and for several years. So he felt that we needed to get a big-time lawyer to handle it. And
They found out his dad was evading taxes for several years. Awesome. What more can they learn about Jose that makes him more of a piece of crap than he already is?
they revolved around that, so I'm not sure if figures came up because I didn't really know the figures at that point.
Did he seem to want to be involved in your financial future?
Yes. Certainly later on in the session, he wanted to.
And how did he express that interest?
Well, he said that he was under a tremendous amount of stress since my brother had come to him, and that he couldn't sleep, and that he was going to have problems working in the same way. That this was, very heavy burden for him, and that we were going to be getting all this money, and he was a good businessman. He showed us some of his business cards, and that he could be helpful if I was going off to school, investing the money, and that he had ideas. And
He went from being scared and stressed out to, let me help you with your money, your finances. Let me be your financial advisor. No thanks, sir.
that we could go into business together at some point. When I eventually, the estate went through and everything was processed and the money came through. Basically what we discussed.
Okay, when you say he was going to be of some help to you when the estate was processed and...
Right. At that time I was thinking of going to school the next semester, and he was going to maybe help me, since I would be in school, help me invest the money. So at that time, that's what we're talking about.
And was it your feeling that if he came to you with some suggestions about how to invest the money, that you'd go along with him?
Well, I didn't feel that we had a lot of choice about going along with him.
Why?
Just, he had said he had tapes and safety deposit boxes. He was very nervous, uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yep. Oziel blackmailed the boys. That's what I think.
There was no confidentiality since he felt threatened. He could go to the police. The sense I got was that he was under a lot of stress and would have trouble working and wanted to be compensated by being able to help us invest and us go into businesses together, and we would both profit. He didn't want me to just give him money. He wanted to be legitimate, but he wanted to be involved, and he had lots of good ideas.
And did it ever come to pass that the estate went through and you got money from it?
No, I got arrested before the estate went through.
It's a good thing he didn't take Oziel on as his financial advisor, because I think he'd be out of money. He is now because of the trials and everything, but back then, if, they hadn't gone to trial and Oziel continued on as a financial advisor, I think the Menendez brothers would be broke by now.
So you never had a situation come up with regard to him actually giving you a definite business proposal?
No.
Did you also think he had expectations with regard to you attending sessions or setting up sessions and paying for them?
Rephrase the question, please.
Did you believe that you were expected to continue seeing Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And did you make a series of appointments and not keep them?
Yes.
Did you pay for them?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Because I felt that, he was expressing concern right after the first meeting with just us not being in contact with him. And then as, the relationship was getting, I thought at the end of November 2nd, he didn't seem concerned about us at all. And it seemed more like it was going to move into a business relationship as long as we agreed. And,
You say he
but
didn't
never.
When you say he didn't seem concerned, are you talking about his fear level? Or?
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he was saying that he felt threatened before, and he had made that joke about us planning to kill him, and so I felt like he was no longer afraid.
Okay, so that's what you thought on November 2nd.
Right.
Now, when you saw him on November 2nd, he said that he described two different types of killings. Do you remember him testifying to that?
Yes.
And he said that one killing was premeditated and involved a plan and a job that needed to be accomplished, something that had to get done. And there weren't any feelings, and that the second kind of killing was something that just came up all of a sudden. There wasn't any premeditation. It was like walking in and finding your wife with a lover, something like that. Do you remember him testifying here to that effect?
Right.
And that the second one was out of intense emotion, and it was just something that came out right away.
Right.
Did you have some sort of discussion with him with regard to different kinds of killings? Did he describe?
No, just those two.
Okay. How did he describe them for you?
Well, the first one was simple. That he basically just said it's when a man comes home and finds his wife in bed with someone else, and he had no idea, and in the spur of the moment, he just, I guess, kills the guy, or whatever he said. And then the second one was something where you knew what the problem was, and it was sort of an ongoing thing, and this happened as a result of that. And he used the words you described there. I'm not exactly sure, because it was a much more complicated version, and there was no example. It was just sort of more theoretical, and I just felt like...
When you say a much more complicated version,
right.
I mean, he gave you lots more facts than he gave when he testified here?
He gave no facts, just a larger theory.
Okay. And did you and your brother pick one of those two?
Yeah, I'm not sure which one of us picked, but I know that we both agreed that it was more... Neither one fit. It certainly wasn't the first one. And
why do you say it certainly wasn't the first one? The first one's where a husband comes home and finds his wife in bed, something like that.
Right.
Why wasn't it that one?
Well, because we knew, that was something that was sort of like a surprise, and that the person didn't know anything about the situation until he walked in the room. That certainly wasn't what happened. And it was more like the second one, where we knew what the threat was and what the issue was and the problem, and we had taken steps to protect ourselves, and this had sort of occurred because of that, and it was just more like the second one. So we just said that it was more like the second one.
Now, when he described it here, he said he used words like premeditated, a job that needed to be accomplished, weren't many feelings. Is that what you agreed with? Is that the way he described it to you?
No, he didn't say anything about a job needed to be accomplished or anything like that. He just described it as something where there was, I believe he did say a problem, and that what had happened was solve the problem. It's basically what he was saying. It was more along those lines. It didn't fit what happened exactly, but it was more closer certainly than the first example.
Did either one of them fit the situation?
No. And he didn't know what the situation was, so he was sort of at a disadvantage.
Did you say to him neither one of those fit?
I believe I said that it wasn't really either of them, but it was more like the second one, is what one of us said that. It may have been myself.
Now, was it a crime where there were no feelings involved?
No, but I don't think that's what he said either. The second one was not one where there were no feelings.
When he testified here in court, he said that the second one involved premeditation. Do you remember him using that word when he talked to you and your brother about it?
No.
All right, let's take our recess at this point, and we'll resume at 3:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't form an direct examination.
Menendez, I'd like to take you back, if I can, briefly to October 31st, when you first met with Dr. Oziel. And Dr. Oziel testified here that, excuse me, when you first came in, you said that it was extremely stupid that Erik had told him, Dr. Oziel, and had confessed all the details to the crime. Do you remember him testifying to that?
Yes.
And did you say that when you first went in on October 31st?
No. Maybe something to that effect, but not those words.
Did you say, did you tell Erik that you thought it was stupid that he confessed?
I may have said that.
And would you have said something about him having told all the details? It was stupid that he told all the details of the crime?
No, I couldn't have said that because we didn't get into the details. In fact, I didn't know anything that he had told Dr. Oziel other than that he had confessed.
Okay, so when you arrived on October 31st, you didn't have a chance to talk to your brother separately, did you?
No.
And I believe you've testified here already that you didn't want to hear the details of what Erik had told Dr. Oziel. Is that correct?
Right. I wanted to hear him from Erik.
So the session that you had with him, or the time that you spent with Dr. Oziel on October 31st, was that directed at anything other than you're confronting your brother about having talked, and you're talking to Dr. Oziel about whether you're going to come in and have future sessions? Was that all that you talked about then? Do you understand the question, or would you like me to try again?
Well, there were other things that were talking. The confidentiality was talked about. Oziel's own feelings about the way I was acting.
Okay. Was there any discussion about the details of the crime?
No.
Was there any discussion about what specifically Erik had told Dr. Oziel?
No.
Did you say to him that since Erik had now told the details of the crime, it wasn't a perfect murder anymore?
No.
Did you ever tell him it was a perfect murder?
No.
Dr. Oziel said that when you first came in, you were very fearful that he would go to the police or tip the newspapers, and that you didn't believe there was any way for you to be safe now that Dr. Oziel had the information. Did you say something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Were you interested in giving him any more information?
No. Especially in that session.
Did you say something to Dr. Oziel such as that you'd have to figure out what to do about the problem?
I told him I hadn't decided what to do as far as whether I would agree to have a session with him and Erik again and discuss anything. Basically, I didn't want to talk about anything at that point. And I wasn't sure whether I would be seeing him again or not.
Dr. Oziel described you as menacing and threatening when you were in the room with him and your brother. Do you think that that's what your behavior was?
No.
What was your behavior?
Extremely upset, very sort of feeling cornered, and this whole thing going on with my brother, and whether he loved me and whether it was a betrayal of trust, and also.
Well, think about it too. You're walking in as the third party in on their therapy session. So already you're like the outsider coming in. You feel like they're potentially attacking you or focusing, like putting their focus on you for reasons that you don't know. So you're in a defensive mode going in. So I get where he's kind of coming from, like not wanting to open up because you feel like they're both coming at you, almost like they're, tag teaming and to attack you or to get something from you, some information or something. I don't know.
A tense situation with Dr. Oziel about whether I should believe him that he wasn't, just go straight to the police, and that we should have further sessions with him, and it was very tense, and he did say that I seemed menacing to him, but I didn't mean to get that impression.
Dr. Oziel said that you said you didn't feel safe, and you didn't know that there was any way you could feel safe with him having the information. Did you make a comment like that?
Yes.
Dr. Oziel said that you told him that you didn't want to have anybody looking over your shoulder, and that's why you killed your parents to begin with. Did you tell Dr. Oziel that?
No, and that's not why.
Dr. Oziel said that you seemed threatening and unhappy, and that some of it was directed toward Dr. Oziel, some of it toward Erik, and that Erik was getting increasingly agitated. Do you remember him testifying to that?
Yes.
And was Erik getting increasingly agitated?
Yes.
He says that at one point Erik buried his head in his hands and bolted out of the session. Did he do that?
Yes.
And as soon as he got up and bolted out of the session, did you leave or did you stay behind?
I went to follow him, and Oziel didn't want me to go, but I did follow him, and Oziel followed me. So we all left the office.
Dr. Oziel testified that he suggested to you that he thought that the two of you should come back into the office. Do you remember him suggesting that?
Well, not exactly. It was clear that Erik was not coming back into the office. He was leaving. But he did want me to come back in the office, and I was not hysterical and crying, and so I could have gone.
Also, you're not as patient. So, bye. See ya. He shouldn't be talking to you privately anyways.
Back up. I just told him that I needed to take care of Erik, and we could do it another time.
Did Dr. Oziel say anything to you about feeling threatened?
Yes.
And what did you say to him? Or did
I
you
don't
say
think I said anything. I mean, I was rushing to get my brother, and at some point in there, he said that he did not feel comfortable with the way the session was ending, that he felt threatened. He might have said it earlier.
He's the only one doing the threatening here. So how is Oziel threatened?
Earlier too, actually, he said that I seemed menacing to him, and that he may have said I feel threatened by the way you're acting. So he might have said it twice.
And Dr. Oziel testified that you said you weren't going to come back to the session, that you wanted to talk to your little brother, and that basically you just wanted to talk to your little brother before you decided whether or not you were going to talk to him anymore.
Right.
Did you say that?
Right.
Dr. Oziel said that you told him that you weren't sure that you wanted to talk to him anymore at all, and Dr. Oziel concluded that that was extremely menacing. Did you say you didn't want to talk to him anymore at all?
I said that I wasn't sure. That would have been earlier.
Dr. Oziel said that you shook his hand and said, "Good luck, Dr. Oziel." And he testified that he took that to be menacing and threatening also. Do you remember shaking his hand?
Again, I think it's in the hallway when I attempted to say goodbye to him before he followed me downstairs anyway. I may have said something like that, although I don't know what it was that he said that would have made me say good luck to him. I don't know if I said goodbye or what. So I don't know. I could have.
Dr. Oziel said that when he talked to you about having future sessions, that he told you he wanted to work on whatever it was that caused you and Erik to kill your parents. That's what he testified to here.
Right.
Right? And he said that you told him there wasn't anything to work on because what caused you to kill your parents wasn't here anymore, because they were both dead, meaning your parents. Do you remember saying that or something like that?
I may have said that.
What did you mean by it?
Well, that came because he was wanting to go farther than just figuring out why this happened and trying to, figure out the reasons for why he wanted to do actual, more in-depth, like, therapy with me. And I felt very uncomfortable with him. I had felt uncomfortable with him in the past. And I think he knew at that point that I was feeling very distrustful and uncomfortable with him. Although at that point things were pretty good in the session, but still I did not want to really work on like he wanted to, whatever it was that I was feeling, either before or after or because of what happened. And so I just tried to cut it off. And I made a statement that basically I don't want to work on anything with regards to me because. He believed it was because of things my parents were doing or the dynamic, and the family was broken at that point, and my parents were dead. There was nothing, whatever had caused it in his mind was gone. It was over with, whether it be the control or whatever. And so I'm pretty sure that's, I remember saying something like that, although I don't think I used those words, but.
Dr. Oziel asked or testified that you told him that you thought your father would have been proud of you for killing him, that your father knew he should have been killed, and that your father would have been proud of the good job that you did. Do you remember having any discussion with him about whether your father would have been proud of you or not?
We had I wouldn't say it was a discussion, but I was saying that I thought my dad would be proud that my brother and I had stuck together afterwards and were very close. And that was one of the reasons that it concerned me that he went to Oziel instead of me, because I felt that we had stuck together and were very close, and was trying to get him into the same school I was going to and so on, live near each other. And I thought that Dad would be proud of that.
Did you say anything about your dad knew he should have been killed?
No.
Did you say anything about your dad would have been proud of the good job that you did?
No.
Dr. Oziel testified that you told him that you believed that your father would only continue to take more and more money, would only continue to make more and more money as time went on. Did you tell him that?
Yes.
And Dr. Oziel testified that you had suspected that there was another will which would have disinherited the two of you. Did you tell
Yes.
Dr. Oziel that? And he testified that there had been a file on the computer marked will, and that you had arranged to have it erased. Is that true? Did you tell him that?
Not really, not the way that it is there. I explained to him exactly what happened with the computer.
He testified that you said you erased it so that excuse me, that this was to erase the possibility of discovering a will that would have disinherited the two of you. Did you tell him that?
No, I didn't tell him that, and that couldn't be.
He testified that at one point, when he's talking about having the tapes, you expressed some concern in terms of strike that, if I may, Your Honor. Dr. Oziel tells you he has some tapes, and that if something happens to him, those tapes are going to be released. Is that correct?
Right.
And Dr. Oziel testified that in response to that, you indicated that you were concerned about whether something would happen to him accidentally and the tapes would be erased.
Right,
Or would be
especially,
released. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
especially after he mentioned the hitman. You know, I told him, this doesn't sound like a great precaution, because what happens if something happens to you? And then just all this information is just released, and it could just be that you got into a car accident, or you mentioned a hitman, and something about the hitman could have happened, or he could kill you or something, or there just seemed to be obviously anything that could happen in his life, because I guess they were going to be in the safe deposit box for his whole life, is what he was saying. So I was concerned about that, and
Did you make a joke about it, about protecting him? He said that you made a joke about if somebody broke into his house.
yes, I made a joke about it.
What was the joke?
Just that the way he had arranged it with the safe deposit box, it would be like I would almost have to be looking after him for his whole life, and if anything was about to happen to him, like if a burglar broke into his home, I'd have to be there to make sure that the burglar didn't do anything to him, because otherwise my brother's confession would go to the police.
Dr. Oziel testified that there was a discussion between you and your brother when you were there with him on November 2nd about how the family looked perfect, like the ideal family to the outside world, but in reality it was a disastrously negative family, that the marriage between the two parents was a very terrible mother. Do you remember having a discussion like that?
It was a very terrible marriage.
Did you have a discussion like that with Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
He goes on to say that you and your brother talked about the mother and father had almost no relationship except the negative, and it was an emotionally abusive relationship with the father being the abuser. Did you and your brother talk about that in front of Dr. Oziel?
Right.
Dr. Oziel says that you told him that you had nothing but distance with respect to the father, and all you got was criticism, rejection, humiliation, and that you also didn't have a close or nurturing relationship with the mother. Did you and your brother have that discussion in front of Dr. Oziel?
Right, that's not exactly true, but we had that discussion, and that was definitely his view through this entire thing, and I was not. There were things that were not correct about it, but I didn't correct him.
What wasn't correct about it?
Well, there were lots of things. I mean, certainly the change in the relationship between my mom and dad, I didn't mention to him and didn't explain why I felt that was happening. He saw
Well, why was it happening? Ask that question.
my dad as the abuser, and did not have a sense of who my mother was, and really the things that she in her own way was very abusive to him, I felt, and meaning my father. And so I didn't get into my mother at all with him, because he felt she was suicidal, depressed, and it was like a mercy killing thing. So there were a lot of areas where he was really, it just wasn't correct. But we just stayed with what he felt pretty strongly about.
Dr. Oziel said that you talked about idolizing your father, but didn't use the word love with respect to him. Do you remember any discussions with regard to your father and idolizing him?
Yes. And, I think he could get that sense, since I admired my dad a great deal. And I definitely told him that I loved my father. And he was trying to explain to me why that was strange, but possible. And it's just not true that I didn't tell him that.
Dr. Oziel testified that in some ways the two of you were in awe of your father and saw him as a very powerful person because he'd been controlling you for much of your life. Did you and your brother say that?
Yes, that was part of the discussion. I would not have just said it like that, but it's pretty close.
Dr. Oziel testified that you told him that killing your father was a way of vindicating that you had a level of power yourselves. And you said that, he said that was your statement, that you'd expressed what happened as a way of vindicating yourselves, that you had a level of power, and that you'd finally gotten to the place where you did something perfectly. Did you ever tell him that?
No, but I do remember that.
What do you remember?
That he mentioned that as a possible reason or thing that was going on.
Who mentioned it?
That Dr. Oziel said that there might be this, the control might have caused me to react in a way to free myself from the control and be sort of vindicated that I had my own power as a person or something like that. And he talked about that. But we never talked about it, about the perfect stuff.
Okay. So when he talked about this vindicating yourselves and having a level of power yourselves, when he suggested it, did you say, no, you're wrong, or I've never thought about that, or just agree, or what'd you do?
No, see, it wasn't that I was just saying yes, 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 but I was mostly agreeing and I wasn't correcting a lot of things. But the way he says, he gives a long explanation, like using words like that, vindicating levels of power and stuff. It fits to some degree that there was power differences and the control, and so it was very easy to just agree with the things he was saying and discuss it.
And did you ever say that, did either of you ever say on that November 2nd session that you'd finally gotten to the place where you did something perfectly?
No.
Did you feel this had been the perfect crime?
No.
Dr. Oziel testified that he told you that he was going to collect all the mitigating details of your background and so that whatever happened down the road, if you got arrested, those mitigating details could be brought out. Do you remember him saying something like that?
Yes.
Did you think that he was talking about how the crime was committed, or what did you think he was talking about in terms of mitigating details?
Well, that was in the early part of the session when he was saying that he could be, in the event that we got arrested, he could be helpful in a trial to my attorney in piecing together the family constellation, which is basically what he said. And then, just helping explain the dynamic and the reasons as he saw it. He thought he was getting a very clear picture as to why it happened, even if we didn't know why he felt he was getting a good picture, and that he could help in a trial. And
so was it your understanding that this was going to be a collection of positive bits of information about you, or that he was going to be putting together things that would hurt you in a trial?
Positive things.
Dr. Oziel testified that that you had said you had been dating someone that you felt was a difficult person to date, and it was an accomplishment. And you said it was a Rose Festival queen and a Billboard model. Dr. Oziel said these were two different women, and that your father had ridiculed and even made fun of these two women he was dating and called them both bimbos. Do you remember Dr. Oziel testifying to that?
Yes.
Did he call the Billboard model a bimbo?
Yeah, who am I,
Your
Dad?
father. Did
Yes.
your father call the Billboard model a bimbo?
Yes.
What about the Rose Queen?
No, that was the girlfriend. That was like his ideal. He picked her for me, and it didn't work out, but that's what he wanted.
So did you tell Dr. Oziel that your father had called the Rose Festival Queen a bimbo?
No, I wouldn't have told him that.
Tell him that your father picked her as a girlfriend
Yeah,
for
I
you?
was trying to explain the difference. And I did not say that dating Christy was an achievement. I would never have said that.
Christy being the billboard model?
Right.
So is Dr. Oziel wrong here when he says that you said that your father called the Rose Festival Queen a bimbo?
Yeah, he's wrong.
Did you just get it mixed up?
No, I mean, it sounds like he's just trying to make a point and using some of what I told him, but it certainly doesn't. It's not possible that I told him that.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, and we are going to stop it here. This is the end of part 4, Lyle's direct testimony, and we will pick up on Thursday with the first part of his cross-examination. I'm sure it's going to be frustrating to listen to the prosecution, and probably Ms. Bazanich is going to be doing the questioning. And she's really annoying to me. So we'll see how that goes. And we've got 4 parts of it, I believe. So we will get into cross-examination, and hopefully it's not too painful to watch with Miss Bazanich. If I don't know if she's doing the cross, but probably because she's the lead um, prosecutor. So we shall see. I will see you guys on Thursday. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one. Bye now.